My brother thought he could force me to babysit by dumping his crying children in a random taxi and abandoning them at my front door while he flew to Miami. He wanted to teach me a lesson about a black woman's duty to her family. But he did not know I had moved out a month ago. And the woman who actually opened that door was the State Director of Child Protective Services. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut ties with toxic relatives who treated you like a servant. My name is Zoe. I am 32 years old and I run one of the most ruthless estate liquidation and financial audit firms in Atlanta. I built my business from the ground up, turning tragedy and bankruptcy into a highly lucrative enterprise. But to my family, I am just the unmarried sister who cleans out dead people's houses. They view my success as a fluke, and my independence as a direct threat to their traditional patriarchal values. The nightmare started on a miserable, rainy Friday afternoon. I was sitting in my corner office on the 40th floor overlooking the city, reviewing a massive acquisition file, when my phone lit up with a text message from my older brother Marcus. Marcus was 36, a supposedly elite finance executive who wore suits that cost more than my first car and drove a luxury sports vehicle he could barely afford. He was the golden child, the son who could do no wrong in the eyes of our parents. The message he sent read exactly like this: "The Uber driver just dropped the kids off on your porch. Brooke and I are heading to the airport for Miami. Give them some pizza and put them to bed early. Do not call me." We are celebrating her new brand deal. I stared at the glowing screen. My blood turned to absolute ice. I had explicitly told Marcus 3 days ago that I absolutely would not watch his 6-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter this weekend. I hit the call button immediately, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He answered on the 4th ring, the background noise full of airport announcements and the distinct sound of clinking champagne glasses. "What part of 'do not call me' did you fail to understand, Zoe?" Marcus snapped, his voice dripping with that familiar arrogant tone he used whenever he felt interrupted by someone he deemed beneath him. I stood up from my leather chair, pacing the length of my office. "Marcus, where are your kids?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low and controlled. "I just texted you," he scoffed, sounding entirely unbothered. "They are on your porch. Brooke needs this Miami trip for her mommy vlogger aesthetic. Her sponsors are paying for the hotel. You are a single woman with no husband and no children. Your little junk cleaning business can wait. Family comes first." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "You put your children in a stranger's car and sent them to my house in a thunderstorm after I explicitly told you no." Marcus sighed loudly into the receiver, making sure I heard how inconvenienced he felt. "Stop being dramatic. We are already at the VIP lounge. Go open your door before they catch a cold. It is your responsibility to help this family. You should be grateful we trust you with them." I took a deep, steadying breath. "Marcus, I moved out of that house a month ago. I live downtown now in a secured condo building. I have no idea who is in that house right now." There was a split second of silence on the line. Then Marcus laughed. A sharp, dismissive, incredibly cruel sound. "Nice try, Zoe. You are not smart enough to pull a bluff like this. You have been jealous of Brooke's perfect life and my success for years. Now be a good aunt and go outside. I am not ruining my wife's $50,000 brand trip because you want to throw a tantrum and seek attention." He ended the call without another word. I stared at the disconnected screen, but I did not panic. I did not rush to my car to drive across town in the pouring rain. My firm investigates hidden assets and corporate fraud for the elite. I am trained to handle high-stakes crises with zero emotion and absolute precision. I opened my laptop and pulled up the neighborhood security application that was still linked to my old address's exterior cameras. The new owner had not yet changed the administrative access for the porch camera, and the feed loaded instantly. Through the live video feed, I saw exactly what was happening, and it broke my heart while simultaneously fueling a rage I had never felt before. The rain was coming down in thick gray sheets. My niece and nephew were huddled together on the welcome mat, soaked to the bone, crying hysterically as the taillights of the taxi sped away down the flooded street. They knocked weakly on the heavy wooden door, shivering in their thin jackets. The door swung open. But it was not me standing there. It was Helen Sterling. Helen was a 55-year-old woman with a stern face, sharp eyes, and zero tolerance for nonsense. I knew this because I ran a comprehensive background check on her before selling her the house to ensure the financing would clear. Helen Sterling was the Regional Director of Child Protective Services for the state. Through the audio feed, I heard Helen asking the children in a calm but commanding voice where their parents were. My 8-year-old nephew sobbed that his daddy put them in a car and said Aunt Zoe would open the door. Helen looked out at the empty, rain-slicked street, her face hardening into a mask of pure professional fury. She ushered the freezing, terrified children inside out of the storm and immediately pulled out her phone. She was not calling Marcus, she was calling the police. Abandoning minors in a rideshare vehicle without a guardian was a felony, and Helen knew the law better than anyone in the state. I watched the door close knowing that my brother had just initiated his own destruction. While Helen Sterling initiated emergency child endangerment protocols at my old address, Marcus and Brooke were completely oblivious, sipping complimentary champagne at the airport. I knew exactly which terminal they were in, because Brooke had already posted 3 different Instagram stories bragging about their luxury getaway. Brooke was a white woman who had built an entire social media persona around being a perfect affluent mother to 2 beautiful mixed-race children. She constantly performed for the camera, presenting a flawless, curated life that masked the ugly, chaotic reality of her marriage to my brother. I sat back in my office chair watching the rain beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my skyscraper. I could have called the police to intercept them immediately. I could have called Marcus back and begged him to return. But I wanted Marcus to feel the exact level of helplessness and humiliation he thought he could effortlessly force onto me. My brother had spent his entire life being shielded by our parents from the consequences of his own reckless actions. Whenever Marcus made a mistake, my mother Evelyn would steal from my savings to cover it up. When he totaled his first car drunk, they forced me to empty my college fund to buy him a new one. Now he was 36, parading around as a wealthy financial guru while secretly drowning in hidden debt. I opened my firm's highly secured encrypted database. My estate liquidation company often bought up toxic debt portfolios from hedge funds, giving us access to vast amounts of confidential financial data. I typed Marcus's name into the search bar. I knew his financial house of cards was crumbling, but the data that populated on my screen was significantly worse than I thought. His supposedly elite investment firm was leveraged to the absolute breaking point. He was shifting money between shell companies just to make his minimum payments. I picked up my desk phone and called my lead auditor, a brilliant, ruthless man named David. Initiate a hostile audit freeze on all accounts connected to Marcus Vance. Ordered, my voice steady and cold. Flag the accounts for suspected fraud immediately. He used his corporate card to book a flight to Miami today. Freeze it. Freeze everything he has access to. Within 10 minutes, the wheels of justice began turning on 2 entirely different, devastating fronts. At the airport, Marcus and Brooke were walking toward their first-class boarding gate, completely unaware of the storm brewing. According to the police report I received later through my legal contacts, 2 uniformed officers approached them right as they were handing their passports to the gate agent. The officers politely but firmly asked Marcus to step out of the boarding line. Brooke, immediately sensing an opportunity for dramatic content, pulled out her phone and started recording the interaction. "Excuse me!" she shrieked, her high-pitched voice echoing through the crowded terminal and drawing the attention of dozens of onlookers. "My husband is a prominent finance executive. We have a $50,000 brand trip waiting for us in Miami. You cannot harass us like this. We know our rights, and this is completely unacceptable." The lead officer did not even blink at her aggressive posturing. "Marcus Vance, you are being detained for questioning regarding the abandonment and severe endangerment of 2 minors. Your children are currently in state protective custody." Brooke dropped her expensive phone. The live recording captured her perfectly manicured face twisting into a mask of absolute horror as it hit the floor. "What are you talking about?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "They are with his sister Zoe. She is a miserable, jealous woman who hates our family, but she is watching them. She promised to watch them. She is not watching them, the officer replied, firmly pulling out a pair of handcuffs. The residents at the address where you abandoned your children do not know you or your sister. The State Director of Child Protective Services currently has your children in a secure facility. Please put your hands behind your back, sir. Marcus turned a sickening shade of pale, desperately reaching for his wallet and visibly trembling. This is a massive misunderstanding. I will call my sister right now. She is just playing a cruel joke because she is bitter. Let me use my phone. I can clear this up in 2 minutes. You can make your phone calls from the precinct, the officer stated, placing Marcus in handcuffs right in front of the entire VIP boarding line. Brooke collapsed onto her designer luggage, wailing loudly, trying to garner sympathy from the wealthy passengers who were now staring at them in blatant disgust and whispering among themselves. While they were being escorted through the airport and into the back of a police cruiser, I received a secure notification on my computer monitor. The financial freeze was successful. Marcus's corporate credit cards were officially declined. His bank accounts were locked pending a comprehensive fraud investigation. He had absolutely no access to his funds to hire a quick defense attorney or post immediate cash bail. He was entirely trapped. My personal cell phone started ringing, frantically vibrating across my desk. It was my mother, Evelyn. I let it ring 3 times, savoring the moment before finally picking up the call. Zoe. My mother's voice was a hysterical, ear-piercing screech. What did you do? Marcus just called me from a police station. They arrested him at the airport in front of everyone. Why did you call the cops on your own brother? Are you out of your mind? I kept my voice completely neutral, refusing to let her panic infect me. I did not call the cops, Mom. Marcus sent his children to a stranger's house in a taxi during a severe thunderstorm. The homeowner called the police because that is what happens when you abandon children. You are lying, Evelyn screamed through the speaker, her anger vibrating through the device. You always do this. You are so jealous of Brooke's beautiful white skin and her perfect marriage. You promise to babysit and then you deliberately lock them out in the rain to ruin their luxury vacation. You are a wicked, bitter woman. I am driving to the precinct right now and you better get down here and fix this immediately. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my polished mahogany desk. Mom, I told him 3 days ago I was not babysitting. I also told this entire family a month ago that I bought a new condo downtown. Nobody listened to me because nobody in this family cares about what I say unless you need money or a maid to clean up your messes. You ungrateful brat! Evelyn spat back, her voice shaking with rage. Get to the police station right now and tell them it was a miscommunication. Tell them you gave Marcus the wrong address. Cover for him. If you do not fix this right now, you are no longer part of this family. You will be dead to us. I smiled, feeling a profound, incredible sense of peace wash over my entire body. That sounds like a wonderful deal, Mom. Enjoy the precinct. I have a highly successful business to run. I hung up the phone and blocked her number without a second thought. I knew this was only the beginning of a massive war. Brooke would not go down quietly, and my parents would do whatever it took to protect their golden child from the consequences of his actions. But they were about to realize that the scapegoat they had bullied and manipulated for 30 years was now the one holding all the power. And I was not going to stop until their entire fraudulent empire was burned to the ground, brick by miserable brick. I walked into the downtown police precinct 40 minutes later. The air smelled of stale coffee and damp uniforms from the storm outside. The desk sergeant had requested I come down to provide a formal statement verifying the timeline of Marcus's text messages. I wore my tailored charcoal suit, my heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. I did not look like a grieving, confused sister. I looked exactly like what I was, a CEO ready to close a hostile acquisition. I barely made it past the metal detectors when a shrill voice echoed through the crowded waiting area. You evil witch! My mother, Evelyn, was storming toward me. Her designer trench coat was dripping wet. Her perfectly pressed silk blouse wrinkled from her panicked rush to the station. My father, Richard, was right behind her, his face twisted in a deep scowl. Evelyn did not stop to talk. She raised her hand, aiming a vicious, open-palmed slap directly at my face, fully intending to humiliate me in a room full of police officers and civilians. 10 years ago, I would have cowered. 5 years ago, I would have taken the hit and cried in my car, wondering why my mother hated me so much. Today, my reflexes were faster than her outrage. I shot my hand up and caught her wrist mid-air. My grip was iron tight. The loud smack of my palm against her wrist echoed off the concrete walls. Several officers instinctively reached for their utility belts, but I held up my free hand, signaling to the room that I had it under control. "Do not ever raise your hand to me again," I said, my voice eerily calm, projecting clearly across the silent precinct. Evelyn tried to yank her arm away, gasping in genuine shock at my resistance. "You put your brother in a jail cell," she hissed, spit flying from her lips. "You called the cops on your own blood. You walk up to that desk right now and tell them you agreed to watch those kids and you just forgot." I dropped her wrist, letting her stumble back into Richard's chest. "I am not committing perjury to save your golden boy, Mom." I told him no. I have it in writing. "But this is exactly what you do. You expect me to take the fall for his crimes. Just like you expected me to stay silent when you forged my signature on my college trust fund." Richard stepped forward, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "Keep your voice down, Zoe. We do not air family business in public." "Oh, we are airing it," I replied, my voice echoing louder, slicing through the quiet murmurs of the precinct. "Let everyone hear it. Let the detectives hear it. When I was 19, working double shifts at the campus library to pay for my textbooks, my own mother falsified banking documents to drain $30,000 from my tuition account. Why? Because Marcus crashed his leased BMW while driving drunk, and he absolutely needed a brand new Porsche to maintain his image as a young finance prodigy. You stole my education to buy him a toy. Then you told me to take out predatory student loans because a black woman has to work twice as hard anyway. That was your exact excuse for stealing from me." The desk sergeant stared at us, his hand hovering over his radio. A few people waiting on the plastic chairs openly gawked. Evelyn's face turned a mottled shade of gray. She knew the officers were actively listening to a public confession of wire fraud and identity theft. "That was different," Evelyn stammered frantically, looking around the room to see who was paying attention. "We paid you back. You bought me a microwave for my first apartment, and called it even," I corrected her sharply. Richard stepped between us, using his height to try and intimidate me the way he had when I was a teenager. "Your brother is facing felony charges, Zoe. Brooke is having a severe panic attack in an interrogation room right now. If Child Protective Services takes those kids permanently, it is on your hands. You are going to walk up to that front desk, tell them you gave Marcus the wrong address by mistake, and that you will take full custody of the children right now. We will handle the rest with the lawyers." I looked at the man who had spent my entire life treating me like a disposable backup plan. "No," I said simply. "I am going to walk up to that desk, hand over my phone, and let the detectives download every single text message and voicemail Marcus sent me. I am going to provide a sworn statement under penalty of perjury that Marcus and Brooke intentionally abandoned their children in a severe rainstorm to go drink champagne on a yacht. I am not lifting a single finger to save them from the bed they made." Evelyn let out a guttural scream. She lunged forward again, her hands curling into claws, but this time a female police officer stepped swiftly between us. The officer put a firm hand squarely on Evelyn's chest, shoving her back. "Ma'am, step back right now or you will be joining your son in a holding cell." The officer commanded, her tone leaving absolutely no room for debate. Evelyn burst into loud theatrical tears, clinging to Richard's arm as if she were the victim of a brutal assault. "She is a monster," Evelyn wailed, pointing a shaking finger at me from behind the officer. "She has no husband and no children of her own, so she wants to destroy her brother's family. She has always been jealous of his beautiful wife. She is doing this out of pure spite." Before I could respond to her pathetic display, the heavy metal doors leading to the interrogation wing buzzed loudly and swung open. Brooke was escorted out by a stern-looking detective holding a clipboard. Her designer airport outfit was rumpled. Her blonde hair was purposely messed up to look distressed, a clear tactic for whatever sympathy play she was working on. As soon as she spotted me standing in the lobby, the fake sniffling stopped. A look of pure, calculated venom flashed across her face. She immediately threw herself into Evelyn's arms, sobbing loudly enough for the entire precinct to hear. "She did this to us on purpose," Brooke wailed, her voice echoing off the tile floors. "Zoe promised to watch them. She hates me because I am white Evelyn. She is using my babies to punish me for having a perfect life." Brooke buried her face in my mother's shoulder, heaving with exaggerated sobs while peering at me through tear-filled eyes. "Shh, sweetheart," Evelyn cooed loudly for the officers. "You are safe now." Detective Harrison approached us. "Mrs. Vance," he said to Brooke, "we need a clear statement. You claim you had a confirmed arrangement with your sister-in-law to supervise your children this weekend." "Yes," she gasped, trembling perfectly. "Zoe told Marcus she would be home all day. She told us to send them over in an Uber to surprise them with a pizza party. She set a trap. She waited for us to leave for the airport and locked her doors to make us look negligent." Detective Harrison turned his cautious gaze to me. "Ma'am," he addressed me, "is that true? Did you agree to watch the children and then lock them out?" I calmly retrieved my smartphone. I walked directly to Detective Harrison's metal desk. "Detective," I said, my voice steady, "I am the CEO of an auditing firm. I do not do verbal agreements or miscommunications." I placed my phone flat on his desk, showing our text thread. I pointed to the screen. "As you can see, Marcus asked me to babysit on Tuesday at 2. My response was a direct, unequivocal no. I stated I had a corporate merger to review. He asked again on Wednesday. I replied no again. Fast forward to today. You will see a text from Marcus at 3:15 stating he had already put his children in a taxi. But she called him." Brooke shrieked, stepping away from Evelyn. "She called him right after that text and said she would open the door." I smiled, a slow, terrifying smile that made Brooke step backward. I tapped the screen again, opening my call recording application. "I run a business dealing with hostile financial takeovers," I explained. "My business phone automatically records all calls for legal compliance, a feature my brother is very much aware of. Let us listen to that phone call." I pressed play and turned the volume up. The audio was crystal clear. The entire precinct heard Marcus's arrogant voice over the clinking of airport champagne glasses. They heard me explicitly state that I moved out of that house a month ago. They heard me warn him that strangers lived there. And then the devastating climax, they heard Marcus laugh and mock me, telling me to stop being dramatic and refusing to return for his own children because he did not want to ruin Brooke's brand trip. The recording ended with the sharp click of Marcus hanging up. The silence in the precinct was deafening. The officers who had previously looked at me with suspicion were now staring at Brooke and my parents with absolute contempt. Evelyn's jaw dropped. Richard looked physically ill. Brooke's face flushed a deep crimson. The victim narrative she carefully constructed had just been incinerated. Detective Harrison looked up, his jaw tight. He turned to Brooke. "Filing a false police report is a crime. Lying to an investigating officer during a child endangerment crisis is a crime. I suggest you stop talking right now." Before Brooke could muster another lie, the heavy front doors swung open. Helen Sterling walked in, flanked by 2 social workers. She moved with the undeniable authority of a woman holding the fate of families in her hands. She spotted me, gave a professional nod, and turned her attention to the detective. "I am Helen Sterling, Director of Investigations for Child Protective Services," she announced. "I am the current owner of the property where these individuals abandoned their children. The minors have been medically evaluated and interviewed." Brooke lunged forward, her pristine mask completely shattered. "Where are my kids? Give them back to me right now. We are wealthy, upstanding citizens." Helen did not flinch. She looked Brooke up and down with clinical disgust. "Wealth does not exempt you from the law. You and your husband placed 2 children under the age of 10 into a stranger's vehicle, sent them to an unverified address in a thunderstorm, and boarded a flight for a luxury vacation. Furthermore, you attempted to blame a third party to evade criminal liability." Evelyn tried to intervene using her manipulative church lady voice. Please, ma'am. It was a terrible mistake. The children belong with their family. Let us take them home. We will handle Marcus. Helen's gaze snapped to my parents. Absolutely not. The grandparents were just recorded defending the parents' actions and actively attempting to cover up a felony. You are entirely unfit to serve as emergency guardians. Due to the flight risk, the lack of parental accountability, and the active attempt to obstruct an investigation, I am officially placing both children into temporary emergency foster care. The words hit the room like a bomb. Foster care. The ultimate nightmare for an image-obsessed family that prioritizes status over everything. You cannot do this, Richard roared. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my son is? I know exactly who you are, Helen replied coldly. You are the enablers who raised a man willing to throw his kids away for Miami. The children will remain in state custody until a judge determines otherwise. Brooke let out a blood-curdling scream, but it was not the scream of a heartbroken mother losing her children. It was the scream of a narcissist realizing she had lost control of her image. She looked at me, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated hatred. She realized she could not beat me with the law, and she could not beat me with the police. Brooke slowly pulled her shattered smartphone from her pocket. She leveled a deadly glare at me. You think you won, Zoe? She whispered, her voice dripping with malice as she clutched the broken device. My millions of followers are going to destroy you. You are going to wish you never crossed me or my perfect family. I looked at the cracked screen of her phone, then up at her blotchy, tear-stained face. I smiled, adjusted the cuffs of my tailored suit, and walked right past her out the precinct doors. I did not waste my breath arguing with a woman whose entire existence was a carefully curated lie. By the time my private driver pulled up to the curb, Brooke had already booked a luxury hotel suite down the street. She wasted zero time launching her counterattack. Sitting in the back of my town car, I opened the social media application. Brooke was broadcasting live to her 3 million followers. She sat on the edge of a plush hotel bed looking disheveled, clutching a tissue. She wept directly into the camera, weaponizing her tears with terrifying efficiency. She told her audience a horrific, entirely fabricated story. She claimed her children had been violently ripped away by an abusive, vindictive sister-in-law. She used all the classic dog whistles, painting me as an angry, jealous, unhinged woman who resented her perfect marriage. She sobbed that I had lured her children to a dangerous neighborhood and falsely reported her to the state just to steal her babies. The comments poured in like a toxic avalanche. Within 20 minutes, the digital mob mobilized. My firm's reputation became their primary target. My phone began buzzing relentlessly with alerts. One-star reviews flooded our business pages. People who had never even set foot in the state were leaving scathing comments calling my business a front, calling me a sociopath, demanding that the licensing board investigate my practices. My mother, Evelyn, left 3 frantic voicemails, demanding I log online, publicly beg for forgiveness, and retract my police statement before Brooke's followers destroyed the family name entirely. She threatened to come to my office and drag me in front of a camera herself. I ignored the voicemails. Public opinion is a fickle, useless currency compared to cold, hard financial leverage. Brooke thought she was fighting a public relations battle. She did not realize I was waging a financial war. I arrived back at my corporate office. The storm outside was finally breaking, leaving the city skyline slick and glittering. I bypassed my panicked receptionist, instructing her to route all incoming press inquiries straight to our legal department and to ignore the ringing phones. I walked into my corner office, locked the heavy oak doors, and immediately initiated a secure video conference with my lead auditor, David. He appeared on my screen, instantly looking tense, his tie loosened. David informed me that our corporate inbox was being spammed with hate mail and death threats from Brooke's deranged followers. I told him to completely ignore the noise. The internet mob was nothing but a loud, toothless distraction. I wanted him to focus entirely on the money. I instructed David to pivot our aggressive audit from Marcus's corporate hedge fund accounts directly into Brooke's lifestyle boutique. Brooke owned a highly publicized storefront in the affluent shopping district, selling overpriced organic baby clothes and imported home goods. She flaunted it as proof of her independent business acumen and feminist hustle. She constantly bragged at family dinners about being a self-made entrepreneur. But I knew the truth. I knew Marcus paid her exorbitant commercial lease every single month because her revenue never matched her lavish spending habits. David was hesitant at first. He reminded me that Brooke's business was a separate legal entity from Marcus's financial firm, meaning we needed different authorization to tear into those specific records. I told him that was exactly the illusion they wanted everyone to believe. Fraudsters always hide their most toxic radioactive assets behind their spouse's pristine public image. I ordered David to trace the initial capital injection used to launch her boutique 3 years ago. I wanted every supplier invoice, every payroll record, and every tax filing scrutinized under a microscope. Find the bleeding edge, I told him. While Brooke spent the evening performing her theatrical grief for a virtual audience harvesting donations and sympathy from gullible strangers, my team of forensic accountants tore into her digital footprint. We worked through the night. The city below my office window went dark, but my screen illuminated the room with spreadsheets and routing numbers. It took David less than 4 hours to find the first fatal discrepancy. He sent a highly encrypted file directly to my terminal. I opened the file and traced my finger down the highlighted columns. Brooke's boutique was bleeding cash at an alarming rate. It had not turned a legitimate profit in over 2 years. The inventory purchasing costs were astronomical, yet the sales receipts were almost non-existent. However, she was consistently making massive cash deposits at the end of every single quarter. The math was entirely impossible for a legitimate retail operation. I instructed my team to cross-reference Brooke's quarterly cash deposits with Marcus's corporate withdrawals from his hedge fund. The dates lined up perfectly. Marcus was embezzling from his own elite clients and funneling the dirty money through Brooke's organic baby clothing store to wash it clean. Brooke was not just a clueless dependent wife playing dress-up on the internet. She was actively participating in a massive money laundering operation. And she had the audacity to go on the internet and call me a criminal. The sheer arrogance of it fueled my absolute focus. I compiled the transaction ledgers into a master file documenting every single fraudulent transfer. Brooke was currently making $50,000 a month from brand sponsorships based on her wholesome image. Those brands had strict morality clauses. I smiled knowing her empire was built on stolen sand. The trap was finally set. She thought her online followers could save her, but no amount of internet fame could outrun the federal government. My phone vibrated again. It was my father demanding an emergency meeting. The real battle for absolute undeniable justice was just beginning to unfold right now. I grabbed my phone from my desk and took the private executive elevator down to the main marble lobby of my corporate building. The storm outside was still raging, but it was nothing compared to the fury waiting for me on the ground floor. My father Richard was pacing erratically in front of the security turnstiles. He wore his tailored golf attire and a luxury trench coat, looking every bit the affluent, commanding patriarch who expected the entire world to bow to his demands. When he saw me step out of the elevator, his jaw locked. He bypassed the security guards, marching directly toward me with that heavy, intimidating stride he used to terrify me with as a little girl. "What is wrong with you?" Richard bellowed, his voice echoing off the polished stone walls. 2 security guards immediately stepped forward, but I held up my hands silently, instructing them to stand down. I wanted to hear every single word he had to say. "Your brother is sitting in a county holding cell," Richard snarled, stepping into my personal space. "Brooke is locked in a hotel room having a massive panic attack because her sponsors are terminating her contracts. You are going to call the district attorney, retract your ridiculous statement, and post a public apology to your sister-in-law immediately. You will tell the police that you suffered a mental break and gave them the wrong address." I crossed my arms, completely unbothered by his rage. "I do not control Child Protective Services, Dad. Marcus broke the law. Brooke lied to a detective. They are facing the consequences of their own actions. I am not committing a felony to cover up their negligence. Consequences. Richard scoffed his face, turning an angry mottled shade of purple. You are doing this out of pure, bitter jealousy. You have been holding a grudge against this family ever since I refused to fund your little startup business 5 years ago. I told you then that women in our family do not need to play pretend at being executives. I told you to find a good, successful husband like Brooke did and let the men handle the finances. But no, you chose to be a miserable, lonely woman who cleans out dead people's houses for a living. Now you are trying to destroy our family name because you resent Marcus for having a perfect life. I stared at the man who had spent my entire existence treating me like a second-class citizen. You mean the perfect life where you paid for his lavish destination wedding, but told me I had to take out a second mortgage just to pay my own medical bills when I had an emergency? I asked, keeping my voice dangerously level. You mean the perfect life where you praise Brooke for selling baby clothes on the internet, but you refuse to even acknowledge that I built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch? Richard leaned in close, attempting to tower over me. He pointed a thick finger right at my face. I am giving you one chance, Zoe. If you do not fix this mess right now, I am calling my estate lawyer the second I walk out of this lobby. I will write you out of my will completely. You will not see a single dime of my estate. The house, the investments, the generational wealth I built from the ground up for this family, it will all go to Marcus and Brooke. You will be cut off forever. You will get absolutely nothing. I looked at his furious, entitled expression. I did not flinch. I did not cry. Instead, I threw my head back and let out a sharp, genuine, echoing laugh. Richard looked utterly bewildered. His hand dropped to his side as my laughter filled the lobby. He expected me to beg. He expected the threat of losing my inheritance to force me into submission, just like it always had when I was younger. I signaled to my lead auditor, David, who had just stepped out of the elevator behind me holding a thick red stamped folder. I took the heavy folder from David and tossed it directly onto Richard's chest. He fumbled, catching it awkwardly against his expensive coat, glaring at me in total confusion. Open it, Dad. I commanded, my voice dropping to a lethal, ice-cold whisper. You cannot write me out of a will that has absolutely nothing left in it. Richard ripped open the folder, his eyes darting across the highlighted financial documents. I watched the arrogant color completely drain from his face. His imposing posture crumbled in real time as his brain tried to process the catastrophic numbers printed on the official bank letterheads. You gave Marcus total power of attorney over your estate 5 years ago because you believed your golden son was a financial genius. I explained clinically, watching his hands begin to shake. You let him manage your retirement accounts and your investments. What he actually did was use your pristine, paid-off mansion as collateral. He secretly remortgaged your entire estate to cover the massive margin calls on his failing corporate hedge fund. He took out 3 separate predatory loans against your property, Dad. This is a mistake. Richard stammered, his voice suddenly weak and breathless. He flipped frantically through the bank statements bearing his own forged digital signatures. Marcus would never do this to me. He is a senior vice president. He makes millions. He is a fraud, I shot back, showing absolutely no mercy. And he funneled a massive portion of your borrowed money straight into Brooke's failing boutique just to maintain her fake influencer lifestyle. The generational wealth you constantly hold over my head like a weapon, it is gone. It vanished 2 years ago. Marcus spent your entire retirement on Brooke's designer handbags and his own luxury car payments. Your bank accounts are entirely empty, and the final balloon payment on that illegal, predatory mortgage is due next Friday. Richard stumbled backward, clutching the red folder to his chest, as if it were a physical bleeding wound. He looked like a broken, hollow man, finally realizing that the son he worshipped had financially ruined him, while the daughter he despised was the only one telling the truth. The bank. Richard gasped, clutching his chest, his breathing turning ragged and shallow. If the payment is due next Friday, the bank will foreclose immediately. We will lose the family house. Evelyn will be out on the street. I have to call the bank right now and negotiate a delay. I stepped closer, looking down at the patriarch who had enabled my abuser for decades. You do not need to call the bank, Dad. I whispered, my voice dripping with absolute terrifying power. Because the bank sold that toxic debt portfolio this morning, and you are looking right at the person who bought it. Richard stared at me, his mouth opening and closing without producing a single sound. The polished marble lobby of my corporate building felt entirely too quiet. My lead auditor, David, stood silently at my flank, his tablet glowing with the exact transfer documents that proved my claim. You bought it? Richard finally gasped the words, scraping against his throat. That is illegal. That is insider trading. You cannot buy your own family's debt. I will sue you. I will have your license revoked. I stepped closer, invading the space of the man who had always used his physical size to dominate me. It is perfectly legal, Dad. My estate liquidation firm specializes in acquiring distressed assets. Apex Credit was bleeding cash because they trusted an arrogant, incompetent fraud like Marcus. When Apex panicked and bundled his toxic loans to sell for pennies on the dollar, my holding company swooped in. I did not buy it as your daughter. I bought it as a corporate entity. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I am legally your brother's largest creditor. I own every single debt Marcus created, which means I own the mortgage he took out on your house. Richard leaned heavily against the security turnstile, his knees visibly buckling. The security guards watched in stunned silence as the wealthy, imposing patriarch crumbled into a desperate, sweating old man. You cannot do this, he pleaded, his voice cracking into a pathetic whimper. Zoe, please. Your mother loves that house. We hosted your graduation party in that backyard. We are your blood. I kept my expression entirely blank, locking away the little girl inside me who had once begged for his approval. You hosted Marcus's graduation party in that backyard? I corrected him sharply. You told me my business degree was not worth a catered dinner because I went to a state school instead of the Ivy League university you bought Marcus's way into. You made me serve the appetizers to your country club friends and told them I was the hired help. Do not try to rewrite history now that I hold the deed to your property. David handed me a sleek silver tablet. I held it up for Richard to see. The screen displayed a countdown timer. Marcus is currently sitting in a holding cell because he endangered his children, I said, my voice echoing with clinical precision. But that is only a local criminal charge. I am initiating the financial execution right now. I tapped the screen. A loud chime echoed from the tablet. What did you just do? Richard choked out, his eyes darting frantically. I just called the note, I replied smoothly. The terms Marcus signed with Apex Credit included a standard acceleration clause for high-risk commercial loans. Because he missed his last 3 margin calls and committed felony wire fraud by forging your signature on the collateral documents, the lender has the right to demand the entire principal balance immediately. I am the lender. I am demanding the full balance. Marcus owes me $4.2 million payable in 24 hours. When he defaults tomorrow morning, and he will because I froze his accounts, I am initiating full foreclosure proceedings on your estate. Richard grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging into my blazer. Zoe, stop this. I order you to stop this right now. You are tearing our legacy apart. I am your father. You owe me your life. I shoved his hands off me with enough force to make him stumble back. You forfeited the right to call yourself my father the day you helped Evelyn steal my maternity savings to fund Brooke's lifestyle. You watched me lose my baby. You watched me grieve, and you chose to protect your white daughter-in-law's fake Instagram business over your own flesh and blood. You have no legacy, Richard. You just have a mountain of debt and a son who sold you out for a luxury car lease. I turned to the security guards. Escort this man off my property. If he resists, call the police and have him arrested for trespassing. Richard shouted my name, begging and cursing in the same breath, but the guards swiftly grabbed him by the arms and dragged him toward the revolving glass doors. I did not look back. I walked straight to the executive elevator with David right behind me. As the elevator shot upward toward the 40th floor, David looked at his tablet. The acceleration notice has been formally served to Marcus's lawyer, David reported. The bank confirmed the accounts are entirely locked. He cannot move a single cent. What is the next move? We dismantle the wife, I said, staring at my reflection in the polished steel doors. We stepped back into my corner office. The storm had finally cleared, leaving the Atlanta skyline bathed in a harsh, bright afternoon light. My desk was covered in the forensic accounting reports David had compiled during the night. Brooke's entire online empire was built on stolen funds. I sat down at my desk and pulled up the master spreadsheet. Brooke currently had an exclusive sponsorship deal with a major organic baby food company. The contract stipulated a strict morality clause. More importantly, she used Marcus's embezzled money to stock her boutique's inventory, completely bypassing federal tax laws. David, I said, tapping my pen against the desk, Brooke is scheduled to do a massive live stream from her hotel room in an hour. She is doing a sponsored closet tour to show off her designer bags and crying to her followers for donations to fight her legal battle. David nodded, his fingers flying across his keyboard. She already posted the countdown link on her page. She is trying to crowdsource a defense fund by playing the victim. I smiled, the kind of smile a predator makes right before the final strike. Contact the asset recovery team. Send them the hotel address. Since Marcus defaulted on the loans I now own, and those loans were used to purchase Brooke's luxury assets, those assets are legally my collateral. I want the repo team knocking on her hotel room door right in the middle of her live stream. I want them to seize every single designer bag, every piece of jewelry, and every expensive outfit she bought with my stolen money. David smirked, a rare break in his professional demeanor. The repo agents are on standby. They have the court-approved seizure order signed by the magistrate an hour ago. Perfect, I replied. Let Brooke broadcast her own destruction to the entire world. Let her 3 million followers watch the exact moment the fake billionaire lifestyle comes crashing down. I leaned back in my chair, logging into my secondary social media account. I pulled up Brooke's live stream waiting room. Thousands of people were already flooding the chat with supportive messages, calling her a brave mother and a victim of a cruel system. They had no idea they were about to watch a live financial execution. The invisible strings I had attached to Marcus's debt were pulled taut. It was time to rip the entire facade to pieces. Brooke adjusted the ring light shining on her perfectly contoured face. Sitting on the edge of the plush king-sized bed in her luxury hotel suite, she looked directly into the camera lens with wide, tear-filled eyes. I watched her live broadcast on my secondary monitor, sipping a cup of black coffee. The viewer count climbed rapidly, hitting 50,000 within minutes. She had strategically positioned herself so her massive walk-in closet, bursting with designer handbags, limited edition shoes, and glittering jewelry, formed the perfect opulent background. She sniffled, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Thank you all so much for joining. Brooke whimpered, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. As you know, my family is going through a horrific nightmare right now. An abusive, vindictive relative has weaponized the system against us to steal my beautiful children. We are fighting a massive legal battle, and the legal fees are just destroying us. But I am staying strong for my babies. And today, thanks to our amazing sponsors, we are doing a closet tour to raise money for our defense fund. Every purchase you make using my promo code goes directly to bringing my children home. The live chat exploded with heart emojis and angry messages directed at me. People were flooding her defense fund with cash donations. They praised her resilience and complimented her incredible strength. Brooke smiled a brave, fragile smile and stood up to walk toward the closet. She picked up a bright orange designer bag, stroking the premium leather. I bought this piece in Paris right after my youngest was born, she sighed nostalgically. Marcus surprised me with the trip. She was lying. Marcus bought that bag in Atlanta 3 weeks after he missed his first commercial margin call, draining his elderly client's pension funds to cover the credit card charge. I remembered that exact month. It was the same month Brooke had cornered me at a family dinner, loudly mocking my tailored wool coat because it was not a recognized designer brand. She told everyone at the table that a woman's worth was measured by how much money her husband spent on her wardrobe. Now, she was holding the stolen fruit of her husband's felony wire fraud and begging strangers on the internet for legal fees. A heavy, aggressive knock pounded on her hotel room door. Brooke gasped, pressing a hand to her chest for the camera. "Oh my goodness," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "That must be room service." Marcus arranged for some comfort food before the police unjustly detained him. "He is such an amazing provider. Let me go grab that." She left the camera stationed on the tripod, framing the entire living area and the open closet. She walked to the heavy wooden door and pulled the handle. The door flew open. It was not room service. Four broad-shouldered men wearing dark tactical vests and carrying thick clipboards stepped into the hotel suite. They moved with swift, calculated authority, completely ignoring Brooke's shocked gasp. The lead agent, a tall man with a shaved head and a booming voice, held up a court order with a bright red seal. "Brooke Vance," he announced, his voice carrying perfectly across the hotel suite and straight into the microphone of her live stream. "We are authorized asset recovery agents executing a court-ordered collateral seizure. Step away from the merchandise immediately." Brooke froze. Her eyes darted from the agents to her phone, still broadcasting to over 60,000 people. "What are you talking about?" she shrieked, her voice losing its soft, breathy pitch and turning harsh and shrill. "Get out of my room. This is a private suite. I am calling hotel security." The lead agent did not blink. "Hotel security escorted us up here, ma'am." He looked down at his clipboard, reading the legal declaration loudly and clearly. "You are currently in possession of luxury assets purchased with funds tied to defaulted commercial loans under Apex Credit. Because the borrower, Marcus Vance, has defaulted on a balance of $4.2 million, and an emergency acceleration clause was triggered this morning, the creditor has authorized the immediate repossession of all items purchased with those stolen funds." Brooke lunged towards the camera to turn it off, but two agents had already bypassed her, stepping directly in front of the lens. They unrolled heavy-duty black canvas bags and walked straight into her pristine, meticulously organized walk-in closet. "No!" Brooke screamed, grabbing the arm of the lead agent. "You cannot take my things. My husband bought those for me. They are mine." "Your husband bought them using embezzled corporate funds and fraudulent credit lines," the agent replied loudly, easily, sidestepping her grasp. "Everything in this closet is stolen property, Mrs. Vance. It belongs to the creditor now." The live chat on my screen moved so fast it was a blur. The heart emojis instantly vanished, replaced by thousands of question marks and shocked comments. People were realizing they had just donated money to a woman actively being raided for financial fraud. I watched with absolute unblinking satisfaction as the agents went to work. They moved with clinical precision. They grabbed the orange bag she had just cried over, tossing it unceremoniously into the black canvas sack. They swept entire rows of red-soled shoes off the racks. They opened her velvet jewelry cases, dumping diamond tennis bracelets, luxury watches, and gold necklaces into the collection bins. "Stop it! Stop it right now!" Brooke wailed, dropping to her knees on the luxury carpet. She was no longer acting. This was genuine, unfiltered panic. The material possessions she worshipped, the items she used to assert her racial and economic dominance over me for the past decade, were being stripped away in front of a global audience. "Call Marcus. Someone call my husband. He is a millionaire. He will sue all of you." "Marcus is in a holding cell, ma'am," the agent reminded her bluntly, "and his bank accounts are frozen." Brooke scrambled toward her phone, tears ruining her expensive makeup, her face contorted in an ugly, desperate grimace. "Who sent you?" she screamed at the agent, her voice cracking. "Who authorized this? Who is the creditor?" The lead agent pulled a single sheet of paper from his clipboard and dropped it onto the floor right in front of her trembling hands. "The creditor who purchased your husband's debt portfolio this morning is Zoe Vance, representing Vance Estate Liquidation." Brooke stared at the paper. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly and hollow. She looked directly into the camera lens, her mouth hanging open, entirely speechless. The internet watched her perfect, wealthy, untouchable facade shatter into a million jagged pieces. The feed abruptly cut to black as an agent accidentally knocked the tripod over, but the damage was irreversible. Brooke's brand was dead. I leaned back in my chair, closing the browser window. The financial execution was complete. But before I could even take a sip of my coffee, my desk phone rang. It was an emergency call from a local hospital. A nurse was on the line informing me that my mother Evelyn had just been rushed into the emergency room, suffering from a massive panic attack, and she was begging for me to come. I drove my car straight to Atlanta General Hospital, the tires slicing through the deep puddles left by the violent storm. The emergency room waiting area was a loud, chaotic blur of flickering fluorescent lights and highly distressed families seeking urgent care, but I did not stop at the main security desk. The panicked nurse on the phone had given me a specific room number in the VIP cardiac wing, a specialized wing that required a premium insurance policy or a massive upfront cash deposit. My mother Evelyn always demanded absolute luxury, even in her supposed medical emergencies. I stepped off the elevator on the fourth floor, my expensive heels sinking deeply into the plush, pristine hospital carpet. I expected to hear the frantic, rhythmic beeping of vital heart monitors or see a dedicated team of doctors rushing around a mobile stretcher. Instead, I found absolute eerie silence outside room 412. I pushed the heavy, solid wooden door open. Evelyn was not desperately clinging to life. She was sitting propped up against a mountain of crisp, white hospital pillows, wearing her expensive silk pajamas that she must have packed before calling the ambulance. Her makeup was entirely flawless. Not a single eyelash was out of place. Her breathing was perfectly normal. There were no oxygen tubes, no IV lines, and no panicked doctors. She was holding a delicate porcelain cup of herbal tea. Standing next to her hospital bed was Marcus. He was no longer in a county holding cell. He wore the same wrinkled suit from the airport, looking exhausted and desperate, but he was free. He must have drained the very last of his hidden shell accounts or found a predatory bail bondsman willing to take a massive financial risk. Beside Marcus stood a short, balding man in a cheap gray suit holding a thick leather briefcase. The man had the unmistakable aura of a bottom-feeding defense attorney. I stopped just inside the doorway, my hand resting on the metal handle. I looked at the three of them, letting the sheer audacity of the setup wash over me. This was not a medical crisis. This was a calculated ambush. "Zoe, thank God you are here," Evelyn cried out, her voice dropping into a theatrical quiver as she reached a trembling hand toward me. "My heart could not take the stress of what you did to this family today." The doctor said I was on the verge of a massive cardiac event. I did not step closer. "You look exactly like you did when you faked a fainting spell at my high school graduation," I said, my voice echoing coldly in the sterile room. "You pretended to pass out just to stop my father from taking me to a celebratory dinner. You forced us to spend the evening comforting Marcus, instead simply because he failed his university entrance exam that morning. You do not have a heart condition, Mom. You just have a severe allergy to losing control." Marcus stepped forward, his face twisting with rage. "Shut your mouth and show some respect, Zoe. Mom is in a hospital bed because of your psychotic vendetta. Brooke is locked in a hotel room facing federal fraud charges because you unleashed your corporate attack dogs on her business. My kids are sleeping in a state facility surrounded by strangers. You have had your fun. Now you are going to fix it." Marcus signaled to the balding man in the gray suit. The lawyer stepped forward, snapping open his leather briefcase. He pulled out a stack of legal documents and slapped them onto the rolling hospital tray at the foot of Evelyn's bed. He handed me an expensive gold pen. "My name is Arthur," the lawyer said, his voice slick and arrogant. "I represent your brother. What you did today constitutes malicious corporate sabotage and filing a false police report. However, my client is a generous man. He is willing to forgive your illegal actions and keep you out of prison, provided you sign these documents immediately." I looked down at the stack of papers. I picked up the contract and flipped straight to the financial demands. Marcus was requesting a $2 million immediate cash transfer to cover his commercial defaults. The second document was a strict non-disclosure agreement, permanently barring me from discussing his fraudulent loans or Brooke's fake boutique. The third document was a sworn legal affidavit. It was a pre-written statement for me to sign under penalty of perjury, claiming that I had a severe mental breakdown, that I maliciously called Child Protective Services out of spite, and that Marcus and Brooke were perfect loving parents. Sign the papers, Zoe Evelyn pleaded from her bed, dropping the weak voice and speaking with aggressive authority. You owe this family. You will transfer the $2 million to your brother's account right now. You will sign that affidavit so Brooke can get her children back tonight. You will take the blame for the police call. You want me to commit perjury, admit to a crime I did not commit, and hand you $2 million of my own hard-earned capital to save you from federal prison, I asked, looking directly into Marcus's bloodshot eyes. You have the money, Marcus snapped, slamming his fist onto the hospital tray. $2 million is nothing to you. It is your duty to protect this family. You are a single childless woman. You have no real responsibilities. My career, my marriage, and my reputation are on the line. You are going to sign that contract, or Mom and Dad will ensure you never work in this city again. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with malicious intent. We sacrificed everything to make sure you had a future. Family protects family. If you do not sign that paper right now and save your brother, you will be confirming that you are exactly the selfish, worthless failure we always knew you were. I looked at the gold pen resting on top of the extortion documents. I looked at the lawyer, the brother who thought he could bully me, and the mother who thought she could manipulate my basic human empathy. The sheer hypocrisy of Evelyn talking about family sacrifice ignited a blazing fire deep within my chest. A very specific, highly painful memory clawed its way to the surface of my mind. A dark secret they thought I had buried forever was about to be dragged out into the harsh hospital lighting. I picked up the heavy gold-plated pen from the rolling hospital tray. Marcus crossed his arms over his chest and smirked fully, believing his aggressive intimidation tactics had finally broken my spirit. Evelyn leaned back against her mountain of crisp white pillows with a satisfied, triumphant sigh, already abandoning her fake medical emergency now that she thought she had secured her payday. I looked at the extortion documents demanding $2 million. I looked at the fraudulent affidavit demanding I commit perjury to clear my brother's name. Then I gripped the expensive pen with both hands and snapped it cleanly in half. Dark blue ink exploded across the pristine white pages, ruining the contracts instantly. Before Marcus could even register what had just happened, I grabbed the edge of the metal hospital tray and flipped it violently upside down. A massive, deafening crash echoed through the quiet VIP cardiac wing. Stainless steel medical instruments, plastic water pitchers, and the ink-stained legal documents scattered aggressively across the polished linoleum floor. Marcus jumped back in shock, his expensive leather shoes narrowly missing a rolling glass cup. Evelyn shrieked, clutching the collar of her silk pajamas. Arthur, the sleazy defense attorney, pressed himself flat against the hospital wall, his eyes wide with absolute terror. Family protects family. I repeated, my voice rising to a commanding, lethal volume that dominated the entire room. You have absolutely no right to use that word in my presence. You lost the right to call yourselves my family 4 years ago. Evelyn immediately tried to resume playing the victim. She clutched her chest and began taking rapid, shallow breaths, glancing toward the open door in hopes of attracting a sympathetic audience. But I stepped directly up to the side of her hospital bed, towering over her. Do not even think about faking a heart attack right now, Mom. I snapped, my voice slicing through her theatrical performance like a blade. Because I remember what it feels like to be lying in a real hospital bed fighting for my life. I remember bleeding out in a sterile emergency room when I lost my baby. The color instantly drained from Marcus's face. He looked down at the floor, suddenly unable to maintain his arrogant eye contact. Yes, Marcus, look at the ruined floor. I continued, my words hitting them with the force of physical blows. While I was being wheeled into surgery for an emergency medical procedure, fighting through the worst physical and emotional agony of my entire existence, my grieving process meant absolutely nothing to this family. I had $60,000 saved in a joint emergency savings account. It was an old account that Dad had forced me to keep him on as a co-signer when I first went to college. It was money I had painstakingly saved from my very first corporate bonuses. It was money I had set aside specifically to fund my unpaid maternity leave. It was money I planned to use to build a nursery for my child. Arthur shifted uncomfortably against the wall, clutching his leather briefcase. This was not the quick, quiet financial settlement Marcus had promised him. I woke up from the anesthesia, utterly devastated and entirely alone, I said, the raw, unhealed pain fueling my absolute fury. And 2 days later, I woke up without a single cent to my name. You and Dad logged into the banking portal while I was heavily medicated. You drained the entire account. You stole the financial security meant for my unborn baby. And what did you do with it, Mom? I want you to tell Marcus's lawyer exactly what you bought with my grief, Evelyn stammered, looking frantically between Marcus and the open doorway. We were going to pay it back eventually, Zoe. You have to understand the pressure we were under. Brooke desperately needed immediate capital for her boutique. Her organic suppliers were threatening to drop her retail contracts. It was a necessary temporary family loan to save her business from going under. You funded your white daughter-in-law's vanity project with the money meant to bury my child, I roared, my voice shaking the glass windows of the hospital room. At that exact moment, the heavy wooden door to the hospital room swung completely open. 2 cardiac nurses and a senior attending physician rushed inside, alerted by the loud crashing of the metal tray. They stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide as they processed the horrific confession they had just walked in on. Is everything all right in here? The doctor asked, looking alarmed at the spilled ink and the scattered debris. Everything is perfectly clear, I told the doctor, refusing to take my eyes off my mother's panicked face. My mother was just explaining how she and my father committed felony wire fraud and drained my bank accounts while I was actively miscarrying her grandchild. The nurses exchanged horrified, disgusted glances. Evelyn shrank back against her pillows. She realized her pristine, wealthy matriarch image was completely disintegrating in front of the medical staff she usually treated like inferior servants. Marcus stepped forward, waving his hands frantically to salvage the situation. It was a private family financial arrangement, Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Zoe, you are acting completely hysterical. You have always been unstable since the miscarriage. This is exactly why the state needs to know you are mentally unfit to make decisions about my children. I turned to my brother, astounded by the sheer audacity of his pivot. Unstable, I asked quietly, taking a step toward him. Because I refuse to finance your felonies. Because I refuse to let your wife play the victim on the internet, after laundering embezzled money through a retail business, built entirely on my dead baby's savings. Arthur finally found his professional voice. Ms. Vance, I strongly advise you to lower your voice and watch your accusations. Defamation is a serious legal charge. Sue me, I challenged him, stepping right into his personal space. Take me to court, Arthur. Put me under oath so I can officially subpoena the banking records from 4 years ago. Let a federal judge trace the exact routing numbers from my maternity account straight into Brooke's limited liability company. I have the receipts. I have been holding on to those bank statements for 4 years, waiting for the exact day this toxic family tried to cross me one last time. Arthur swallowed hard. He looked at Marcus, clearly realizing his client had lied to him about the strength of their legal position. You are dead to me. Evelyn spat from the bed, dropping the sick patient act entirely. Her face was twisted in pure, unadulterated hatred. You are no daughter of mine. We should have left you with nothing. You did leave me with nothing, I replied coldly, smoothing the lapels of my suit jacket. And I turned that nothing into a massive corporate empire that just bought your entire life. You do not have a house, Mom. You do not have a retirement fund. And as of today, you do not have a daughter. I turned on my heel, my expensive shoes crunching over the broken pieces of the gold pen. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing my arm tightly. You are not walking out of here, he threatened, his breath hot against my face. If you do not sign these papers right now, I will make sure you never see the light of day. I will hire the most vicious family law attorney in this state. I will drag your medical history into open court. I will tell the judge you are a barren, bitter woman who called Child Protective Services just to steal my kids because you could not keep your own. I yanked my arm out of his grasp with such violent force he stumbled backward into the wall. "Try it," I whispered, my voice dripping with absolute venom. "Bring your worst." I walked out of the hospital room, leaving them surrounded by the wreckage of their extortion attempt and the disgusted stares of the medical staff. But as I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender was a high-profile, incredibly aggressive defense attorney known for destroying witnesses on the stand. Attached was a formal legal subpoena. Marcus had not been making an empty threat. He had already unleashed a legal monster to annihilate my character, setting the stage for a vicious courtroom war. I stepped out of the hospital elevator, my eyes locked on the glowing screen of my smartphone. The email attachment Marcus had just sent was a formal, aggressively worded subpoena filed by Victor Thorne. Everyone in the Atlanta corporate sphere knew Thorne. He was a notoriously vicious defense attorney who specialized in character assassination, a man who made his millions destroying women in family court by weaponizing their deepest traumas. I scanned the legal document as I walked through the sliding glass doors into the humid night air. The filing was a masterpiece of legal fiction. Thorne was not just fighting the child endangerment charges. He was launching a full-scale assault on my sanity. He had filed an emergency motion requesting a mandatory psychiatric evaluation for me, claiming I was an unfit, vindictive, and mentally unstable relative. The document specifically cited my 4-year-old miscarriage. Thorne explicitly argued that my grief had morphed into a dangerous, obsessive womb envy directed at my white sister-in-law, and that I had maliciously orchestrated the entire Child Protective Services intervention to kidnap her mixed-race children out of pure spite. I slid into the plush leather seat of my waiting town car and tapped my fingers against the armrest. My brother was trying to legally label me as an angry, hysterical black woman to discredit my testimony and shield his wife from federal prison. It was a classic racist, misogynistic playbook, and it infuriated me. But beneath the blazing anger, a much colder analytical part of my brain clicked into gear. I had initiated a complete, impenetrable, hostile freeze on every single bank account, credit line, and corporate asset connected to Marcus and Brooke. Thorne commanded a minimum retainer of $200,000 just to read a case file. So how exactly did a man with zero access to liquid capital hire the most expensive shark in the city? I dialed David as my driver pulled away from the hospital curb. David answered on the first ring, the sound of rapid typing echoing in the background. "I need you to run a shadow trace on Victor Thorne's law firm," I commanded, keeping my voice low and steady. "Marcus just retained him. I want to know exactly where the money came from, because my brother does not have 2 pennies to rub together right now." "Give me 60 seconds, David replied, his fingers hammering the keys. I listened to the hum of the city traffic outside my window. I knew Marcus was desperate, but I needed to know exactly how desperate. David came back on the line, his tone dropping an octave. "Zoe, he did not use a bank. The retainer was wired an hour ago from a decentralized cryptocurrency wallet routed through a shell corporation in Miami. I just cross-referenced the blockchain registry. The wallet belongs to the Delgado Syndicate." I let out a sharp, genuine laugh. Marcus had officially lost his mind. The Delgado Syndicate was not a bank. They were a notoriously violent ring of underground loan sharks who catered to desperate executives and degenerate gamblers. They charged predatory, extortionate interest rates and collected their debts with broken bones and shattered kneecaps. Marcus was so absolutely terrified of his image crumbling and Brooke going to prison that he had borrowed mob money to fund his legal defense. He was currently swimming with actual sharks, believing his pristine corporate suit would protect him from getting eaten alive. "Thorne thinks he can bully me into a quick settlement by threatening to expose my medical history in open court," I told David, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. "He wants to force me to sign that $2 million bailout and sign an affidavit clearing Marcus and Brooke. They are relying on my silence. They are relying on the fact that I have always been the quiet, obedient scapegoat who absorbs their abuse to protect the family reputation." "What is our countermaneuver?" David asked, completely unfazed by the escalating threats. Thorne's entire legal defense rests on a single fragile lie, I explained. He is arguing that Marcus and Brooke made a simple, innocent logistical mistake with the babysitting schedule and that I maliciously locked the children out in the rain to punish them. We are going to obliterate that lie. I need the ultimate, undeniable proof of their intent. I need the driver of that taxi. I ordered David to pull the archived security footage from my old house's front porch camera. We had the exact timestamp of when my niece and nephew were abandoned on the welcome mat. I needed the license plate, the make, and the model of the rideshare vehicle. David immediately routed the raw video feed through our firm's proprietary image enhancement software, a tool we typically use to track down stolen luxury vehicles and hidden corporate assets. Within 20 minutes, I was walking into my corporate office building. David met me in the lobby holding out his tablet. "We got a hit," he announced, matching my rapid pace as we headed for the executive elevator. It was an independent black car service, not a standard rideshare app. The driver's name is Hector Ramirez. He operates mainly out of the upscale suburban zones. "Does he have a camera in his vehicle?" I asked, my heart accelerating with sheer anticipation. "Standard commercial insurance requires all independent livery drivers to maintain dual-facing dash cams," David confirmed with a sharp grin. "It records the road and the passenger cabin simultaneously, including full audio." "Find him," I ordered, stepping into my office and throwing my suit jacket over the back of my chair. "I do not care what his shift is. I do not care what he is doing. Send our private security contractors to his location right now. Offer him $10,000 cash just to walk through my doors. I want him sitting in my boardroom before midnight." My phone lit up with another threatening email from Victor Thorne, demanding I schedule a deposition by tomorrow morning or face an emergency court order. I swiped the notification away without reading it. Thorne and Marcus thought they were playing a brilliant game of legal chess. They had no idea I was about to flip the entire board. 2 hours later, the heavy glass doors of my executive boardroom swung open. My lead security contractor walked in, escorting a tired-looking man in a rumpled driver's uniform. Hector Ramirez clutched a small black digital storage drive in his right hand. He looked nervously around the opulent, sprawling boardroom, clearly intimidated by the sheer wealth and power radiating from the corporate environment. I stood up from my chair, walked directly over to the head of the conference table, and gestured for him to sit down. I was not going to let Thorne paint me as a bitter, unstable woman. I was going to use Marcus's own violent, arrogant actions to secure his permanent destruction, and the key to his federal prison sentence was sitting right in the palm of this driver's hand. "Mr. Ramirez," I began, taking my seat at the head of the heavy mahogany conference table. My lead auditor, David, stood silently by the door. "I appreciate you coming in so late. I understand my security team made you a financial offer for the digital storage drive in your hand." Hector swallowed hard, looking down at the small black rectangle. "They offered me $10,000 cash, ma'am. But I need to know this is not going to put me in danger. I saw the news. I know the police arrested the man who ordered my car. He told me he was sending his kids to their aunt's house because of a family emergency. When I dropped them off, they were crying. I waited until the door opened, but I did not know it was the wrong house. I do not want to lose my commercial license or go to jail for child abandonment." "You did nothing wrong," I assured him, my voice projecting absolute confidence. "You fulfilled your contract as a driver. The liability falls entirely on the parents who placed unaccompanied minors in your vehicle. I am the aunt they were supposed to be sent to, but my brother knew I had moved out. He used you as a pawn. I am paying you $10,000 for the unedited dashcam footage to ensure he never hurts those children again." Hector let out a shaky breath, clearly relieved, and slid the drive across the polished wood table. David stepped forward, placed a thick envelope of $100 bills in front of the driver, and handed him a standard non-disclosure agreement and an affidavit of authenticity. While Hector counted the cash with trembling hands and signed the paperwork, I plugged the drive into my master terminal. The massive flat screen on the boardroom wall flickered to life. I opened the video file stamped with the exact date and time of the storm. The high-definition dual-facing camera captured both the rainy street and the interior passenger cabin perfectly. The audio was crystal clear. The video started with Hector pulling his black SUV up to the sprawling driveway of Marcus and Brooke's suburban McMansion. The torrential rain hammered against the windshield. The rear door of the vehicle swung violently open. Marcus leaned in, his face twisted in annoyance, violently shaking his designer umbrella. "Get in the back!" Marcus yelled, yanking his 6-year-old daughter by the arm and practically tossing her onto the leather seat. She was already sobbing, clutching a small stuffed animal wearing a thin spring jacket completely unsuitable for the freezing storm. Then Brooke appeared in the frame. She was not the weeping, fragile victim she played on her Instagram live stream. Her face was contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. She was dragging her 8-year-old son by the collar of his shirt. The boy was crying hysterically, planting his feet on the wet pavement, begging his mother not to make him go. "Please, Mom," the boy pleaded, his voice breaking through the audio feed. "I want to stay with you. I will be good. Please do not send us away." Brooke shoved him brutally into the back seat next to his sister. "Shut up," she shrieked, leaning into the cabin. Her flawless, camera-ready makeup was dripping with rain, making her look absolutely demonic. "You are ruining my trip. My sponsors are waiting in Miami, and I am not missing a $50,000 payout because you cannot behave." The boy reached out, trying to grab her sleeve. "But Mom, I am scared. We do not want to go to Aunt Zoe's house." Without a single second of hesitation, Brooke raised her hand and slapped her 8-year-old son directly across the face. The sharp, violent smack echoed loudly through the vehicle's microphone. The little boy recoiled, burying his face in his hands, wailing in sheer terror. His younger sister screamed and curled into a tight ball in the corner of the seat. I sat frozen in my boardroom chair. The air in my lungs turned to ash. I knew Brooke was a narcissistic, manipulative hypocrite, but witnessing her physically assault a terrified child sent a shockwave of lethal, unrelenting fury straight to my core. She had used my race and my lack of children to paint me as an angry monster, all while beating her own son in the back of a taxi. Marcus leaned into the frame right next to his wife. He did not flinch at the slap. He did not comfort his crying children. He just looked at Brooke and sighed in irritation. "Just dump them. At Zoe's?" Brooke snapped at Marcus, her voice dripping with venom as she wiped the rain from her forehead. "They will not die. She will open the door eventually. Just tell the driver to drop them on the porch and leave." Marcus nodded, pulling out his wallet. He tossed a few $20 bills into the front passenger's seat. "Take them to the address on the app," Marcus ordered Hector. "Do not wait around. Just drop them and go." Marcus slammed the heavy car door shut. The video showed Hector looking back at the crying children through his rearview mirror, visibly distressed but legally bound to follow the route. The vehicle pulled away from the mansion, leaving Marcus and Brooke standing in the driveway, eagerly rushing back inside to pack for their luxury vacation. I paused the video. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. David stared at the frozen image of Brooke's furious face on the giant screen, his jaw tight with disgust. Hector had finished signing the affidavit. He looked at me, his eyes full of regret. "I am sorry, ma'am," Hector whispered. "If I had known what they were really doing, I would have driven them straight to the police station." "You brought this to me," I replied, standing up and extending my hand to the driver. "That is all that matters. You gave me the key to end this. You can leave now. My security will escort you out." Once the heavy glass doors closed behind Hector, I turned back to the screen. Victor Thorne, the aggressive shark lawyer Marcus had hired with mob money, was currently preparing to walk into family court and argue that Brooke was a devoted, victimized mother. Thorne was planning to use my miscarriage and my medical history to paint me as an unstable, jealous black woman who lured my white sister-in-law's children into a trap. This video did not just contradict Thorne's legal strategy, it entirely incinerated it. It proved premeditated child endangerment, physical abuse, and absolute malicious intent. It proved that Marcus and Brooke explicitly ordered the driver to abandon the children regardless of whether I was home or not. "David," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register, "I want you to make 5 encrypted backup copies of this digital drive. Store one on our secure offshore server, put one in the corporate vault, and send one directly to Helen Sterling at Child Protective Services." David nodded, pulling the drive from the terminal. And what about Victor Thorne? Let Thorne build his entire defense around the lie, I replied, staring at the frozen image of my brother abandoning his own flesh and blood. Let Marcus and Brooke walk into that courtroom believing they have the upper hand. Let them testify under oath that they are perfect parents who were sabotaged by a bitter relative. We are going to wait until Thorne officially enters their perjured statements into the court record. And then we are going to play this video in front of the judge, the bailiffs, and the entire public gallery. We are going to let Brooke dig her own grave, and then we are going to bury her in it. I turned away from the blank boardroom screen and looked at David. The dash cam footage was safely secured, locking in Brooke and Marcus's fate in family court. But I was not just going to take the children away from abusers. I was going to ensure Marcus never wore a custom suit or saw the inside of a corner office again. We needed to finish the financial autopsy. David's tablet chimed with a high-priority alert from our cybersecurity division. He glanced down, his eyes widening. Zoe, the decryption key just broke through Marcus's hidden server. David announced, his voice vibrating with adrenaline. The offshore files are completely unsealed. Show me, I commanded, walking swiftly back to my executive desk. David mirrored the decrypted files onto my primary monitor. My brother had always bragged at family dinners about his elite financial acumen. Richard and Evelyn treated him like a Wall Street genius, constantly comparing his supposed multi-million-dollar trades to my estate liquidation business, which they sneeringly called a glorified garage sale. But looking at the raw, unfiltered data glowing on my screen, the truth of Marcus's genius was laid bare. He was not a savvy investor. He was a common reckless thief operating a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. The spreadsheets revealed a massive tangled web of offshore shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. Marcus had set up these dummy corporations using variations of his middle name and fake board members. I traced the routing numbers with my finger, matching the offshore deposits to the domestic withdrawal ledgers from his Atlanta-based hedge fund. He is not just covering bad margin calls, David said, leaning over my desk. Look at the origin accounts for these domestic wire transfers. These are not corporate investors. I pulled up the client manifest, cross-referencing the names with the account numbers Marcus had systematically drained. A sickening wave of realization washed over me. Marcus was not stealing from faceless billion-dollar corporations. He was actively targeting and embezzling from the elderly. He had drained the pension funds, retirement accounts, and life savings of senior citizens who had trusted him to secure their final years. My stomach churned as I recognized several names on the victim list. These were not just random retirees. Some of these people were long-standing members of my parents' church congregation. Deacon Hayes, who had known Marcus since he was a child, had his entire retirement wiped out. Mrs. Gable, a widow who used to bake pies for our neighborhood block parties, had her life savings funneled directly into one of Marcus's Cayman Island shell accounts. And where did that money go next? The ledger showed it was routed straight back to Atlanta to pay for Brooke's luxury sports car, her designer closet, and the extravagant Miami vacations they used to flaunt their fake wealth. Richard and Evelyn sat in the front pew every Sunday bragging to these exact same elderly church members about how their golden son was successfully managing their wealth. My parents used their social standing in the Black community to funnel vulnerable, trusting victims directly into Marcus's predatory hands. And when I had tried to warn my father years ago that Marcus's guaranteed return rates looked mathematically impossible, Richard told me to shut my mouth and stop being jealous of a real businessman. Print every single page, I ordered David, my voice turning to absolute ice. Print the wire transfers, the fake corporate charters, the Cayman Island bank statements, and the internal emails where Marcus explicitly instructed his accountant to hide the missing funds. I wanted all compiled, indexed, and cross-referenced by victim. Are we sending this to the Securities and Exchange Commission? David asked, already sending the massive files to the high-speed secure printers in the adjoining room. The SEC takes too long, I replied, standing up from my desk. The SEC issues fines and conducts quiet civil investigations. Marcus stole millions of dollars from vulnerable senior citizens across state lines and international borders. That is federal wire fraud, elder abuse, and international money laundering. We are not sending this to a regulatory board. We are sending this directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I spent the next 4 hours meticulously assembling the dossier. I placed every forged document, every stolen pension record, and every offshore wire transfer into thick black binders. I built an undeniable, bulletproof roadmap of white-collar crime that a federal prosecutor could present to a grand jury tomorrow morning. I was wrapping the final binder in tamper-evident security tape when my personal cell phone buzzed on the desk. The caller ID showed it was my mother, Evelyn. She had been blocked, but she was now calling from my father's phone. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Zoe, Evelyn said, her voice dripping with that fake sugary sweetness she always used when she was plotting a trap. Your father and I have been talking. We know things got heated at the hospital, and we are just so heartbroken over this family division. Thanksgiving is this Thursday. We are hosting a massive dinner at the house. All the aunts, uncles, and cousins are flying in. We want you to come. We want to sit down as a family, break bread, and heal this rift. Marcus and Brooke will be there. We can settle all this legal nonsense privately the way a respectable family should. I stared at the black FBI dossier resting on my mahogany desk. Evelyn did not want to heal the rift. She wanted to ambush me. She wanted to surround me with 30 extended family members, manipulate the narrative, and use the intense pressure of our entire bloodline to force me into dropping the charges and signing over my money to save Marcus. She thought I was still the weak, isolated daughter who would crumble under the weight of family expectations. I picked up my favorite fountain pen, rolling it between my fingers. That sounds like a wonderful idea, Mom, I said smoothly, a predatory smile spreading across my face. I would love nothing more than to see everyone gathered around the table. Tell Marcus and Brooke I will absolutely be there. I even have a very special contribution to bring for the family. Oh, wonderful! Evelyn sighed, her relief palpable as she believed her trap had successfully sprung. We will see you at 4 o'clock sharp. Do not be late. I hung up the phone and looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Atlanta skyline. I was not going to be late. And I was not just bringing a side dish. I was bringing the absolute total destruction of their fraudulent empire, wrapped in a bow, ready to be served completely cold. I pulled my luxury sedan into the sprawling circular driveway of my parents' suburban estate on Thursday afternoon. The rain from earlier in the week had given way to a bitter, biting cold. The driveway was packed shoulder to shoulder with expensive vehicles. My mother had not been bluffing. She had summoned the entire extended family from across the country. Aunts, uncles, and cousins, who usually only flew into Atlanta for weddings or funerals, were all gathered inside. This was not a Thanksgiving dinner. This was a highly coordinated psychological firing squad. I stepped out of the car wearing a sharp crimson pantsuit that radiated absolute power. I did not bring a pecan pie or a bottle of wine. I carried a sleek black leather briefcase containing the forensic financial dossier and the foreclosure notices. I walked up the brick steps and pushed the heavy oak front door open without knocking. The dull roar of 30 family members chatting and laughing echoed through the foyer. But the moment my heels clicked against the hardwood floor, the entire house fell into a deafening, suffocating silence. Every single eye turned to me. I saw Aunt Vivian, my father's eldest sister, glaring at me from the living room sofa with absolute disgust. I saw my cousin Jamal shaking his head in deep disappointment. Uncle Harrison refused to even look in my direction, studying his shoes instead. They had been thoroughly poisoned. Richard and Evelyn had clearly spent the last 48 hours spinning a masterpiece of a lie, painting me as a deranged, jealous woman who had weaponized the police and the foster care system against my own brother out of pure, unadulterated spite. Evelyn broke the silence, gliding across the room in a pristine designer dress, purchased with stolen money. She opened her arms, flashing a fragile, martyred smile for her captive audience. Zoe, my mother said, her voice dripping with artificial grace. You came. We have all been praying for your heart to soften. I did not step into her embrace. I stood perfectly still, letting her arms drop awkwardly to her sides. I told you I would not miss this for the world, Mom, I replied, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. Let us not waste time playing pretend. Tell everyone to take their seats. The massive mahogany dining table had been extended to its absolute maximum length in the formal dining room. Silverware clinked nervously as 30 people took their assigned seats. I was placed deliberately at the far end of the table, isolated, positioned exactly opposite my father at the head. Marcus sat to my father's right. He looked terrible. The arrogant finance executive facade was crumbling. He was sweating through his tailored shirt, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped his crystal water glass. Brooke sat next to him, staring fiercely at her empty plate, absolutely terrified of making eye contact with me after her public humiliation on the internet. Before anyone could pass a single dish of food, Richard stood up. He picked up his butter knife and tapped it sharply against his wine glass. The sharp ringing demanded total submission from the room. "We are gathered here today to give thanks," Richard began, projecting his deep, authoritative baritone voice to every corner of the room. "But we are also here to heal a grievous bleeding wound in this family. The devil has been working overtime to destroy the Vance legacy. He has planted seeds of jealousy, bitterness, and betrayal in the heart of my own daughter." Richard pointed a heavy accusatory finger down the length of the table directly at me. Aunt Vivian leaned forward, clasping her hands tightly together. "Zoe, you need to listen to your father," Vivian scolded, her tone dripping with self-righteous indignation. "Black families are under attack every single day in this country. We do not call the authorities on our own men. We do not throw our own blood into the system. You have brought immense shame to this entire bloodline by locking your brother in a cage and traumatizing his beautiful wife over a simple babysitting misunderstanding." Richard slammed his hands flat onto the table, leaning forward to deliver the final crushing blow. He thought the sheer weight of 30 staring, judging relatives would break my spine. "We are offering you one final path to redemption," Zoe, Richard boomed. "You are going to sign the financial release forms Marcus gave you at the hospital. You are going to drop the malicious debt claims against my property. You are going to march into family court next week and testify that you fabricated the entire story about child abandonment. You will clear your brother's name entirely. And if you refuse—" Evelyn interjected from her seat, her eyes flashing with venomous triumph. "You will leave this house and you will never return. You will be dead to us." Every aunt, every uncle, every cousin at this table has agreed. If you do not sign those papers right now, you will be completely excommunicated. No one in this room will ever speak your name again. You will be entirely alone in this world. I looked around the long mahogany table. I looked at the aunts who used to babysit me, the cousins I grew up playing in the yard with, the uncle who taught me how to ride a bike. They were all nodding in agreement with my mother. They had chosen their side. They had chosen the golden child, entirely willing to sacrifice my sanity, my career, and my finances just to protect the illusion of Marcus's perfection. Brooke finally looked up from her plate, a tiny malicious smirk playing on her lips. She thought she had won. She thought the mob mentality of the family unit was my ultimate weakness. They expected me to cry. They expected me to beg for their love, to apologize for defending myself, and to write a $2 million check just to keep my seat at their table. They vastly underestimated the woman sitting in front of them. The little girl who used to cry in her bedroom because her mother favored her brother was dead. The woman sitting at the end of the table was a corporate executioner. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice or slam my hands on the table like my father had. I simply reached down and picked up my black leather briefcase from the floor. I placed it squarely on top of my pristine porcelain dinner plate. The loud, heavy thud of the briefcase hitting the table made several relatives jump in their seats. "You all think you are sitting here as a jury passing judgment on my morality," I said, my voice eerily calm and carrying a lethal magnetic authority that commanded the entire room. "You think you are threatening me with isolation, but you are entirely misinformed about who holds the power in this house." I popped the brass locks on the briefcase. The sharp clicks echoed like gunshots in the silent dining room. "I am not here to ask for your forgiveness," I announced, pulling a thick stack of legal envelopes from the velvet-lined interior. "And I am certainly not here to save Marcus from the federal prison sentence he earned. I am here to collect my debts." I dropped the empty leather briefcase onto the Persian rug. The dull thud snapped the silent tension in the dining room. I reached across the table and picked up Aunt Vivian's crystal champagne flute. Without a single ounce of hesitation, I struck the delicate crystal against the sharp, polished edge of the mahogany table. The glass shattered violently, sending a shower of glittering shards across the imported linen tablecloth. Several relatives gasped and recoiled in their seats, their hands flying up to protect their faces. The shock of the sound demanded absolute, undivided attention. "I am taking my seat at the head of this table," I announced, my voice slicing through the heavy, suffocating air. I walked slowly down the length of the dining room, my crimson suit a stark contrast to the sea of muted holiday colors. My father Richard stood frozen at the head of the table. I did not ask him to move. I simply stopped right next to him, invading his space, forcing him to shrink back into his chair. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer and pulled out a stack of thick, cream-colored envelopes. They were beautifully crafted, sealed with heavy gold wax, looking exactly like the luxury holiday greeting cards Evelyn loved to mail to her affluent country club friends. I handed the first envelope to Richard. I slid the second one across the table to Marcus. I tossed the third one directly onto Brooke's empty dinner plate. "Go ahead and open your holiday gifts," I commanded, leaning my hip against the edge of the table. I brought enough for everyone to share. Richard broke the gold wax seal with trembling fingers. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents printed on heavy bond paper. He adjusted his reading glasses, his eyes scanning the bold black text at the top of the page. The last remnants of his patriarchal arrogance completely drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and hollow. His hands shook so violently the papers rattled against each other. "Notice of default and impending foreclosure," Richard whispered, reading the header aloud as if the words were choking him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with absolute panic. "Zoe, what is this? What have you done to my house?" "I did not do anything to your house, Dad," I replied, picking up a silver spoon and rolling it between my fingers. "Marcus did. I just bought the receipts." Marcus secretly remortgaged this entire estate to cover his failing hedge fund. He took out 3 predatory loans against the equity of this property. He missed his last margin call and the commercial lender triggered the acceleration clause. They sold the toxic debt to my liquidation firm this morning. As of right now, I am the legal owner of this property and I am officially executing the foreclosure. You have 30 days to vacate the premises before the sheriff physically removes your furniture. The entire extended family erupted into chaotic, overlapping shouts. Uncle Harrison slammed his fist on the table, demanding to know if this was a sick joke. Aunt Vivian clutched her pearl necklace, her eyes darting between me and Marcus. "She is lying," Marcus screamed, jumping up from his chair. His tailored shirt was soaked with nervous sweat. "She is forging legal documents. The bank would never sell a private residential mortgage to a hostile family member. This is a complete scam." I turned to Marcus, my expression devoid of any mercy. "I am a corporate entity, Marcus, and those loans were not private residential mortgages. You registered this house under a fake limited liability company in the Cayman Islands to bypass the domestic credit checks. You committed federal wire fraud to secure that cash." I reached into my blazer and pulled out 2 more gold-sealed envelopes. I handed one to Aunt Vivian and one to Uncle Harrison. "Marcus did not just steal from our parents," I announced, addressing the stunned relatives. "Open your envelopes. Look at the attached banking ledgers." Marcus has been managing the retirement portfolios for the entire extended family for the past 7 years. You all trusted him because he wore nice suits and drove a sports car. Look at page 3 of your portfolio, Vivian. Your entire retirement fund is gone. It does not exist. Marcus completely drained your accounts and funneled the cash to pay the commercial lease on Brooke's boutique. Aunt Vivian ripped open her envelope. She read the bank statements, her breath hitching in her throat. She looked at Marcus, her eyes welling with furious tears. "You stole my pension!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You stole the money I saved for my grandchildren." The unified front against me instantly disintegrated. The fierce family loyalty they had tried to weaponize just minutes ago evaporated the exact second their own wallets were threatened. Uncle Harrison surged out of his chair, grabbing Marcus by the collar of his expensive shirt and shoving him hard against the dining room wall. Plates crashed to the floor. Evelyn shrieked, trying to pry Harrison's hands off her golden child. Brooke sat completely frozen at the table. She stared at the foreclosure notice and the damning financial ledgers resting on her plate. She immediately reverted to her usual strategy, weaponizing her tears and playing the helpless white victim. I did not know, Brooke sobbed, looking around the room at the furious black relatives surrounding her. I swear I had no idea what Marcus was doing. He told me it was clean money. He told me my boutique was thriving. I am just a mother trying to build a brand to support my children. Zoe, please, you cannot blame me for my husband's crimes. I let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut right through her pathetic performance. Open your envelope, Brooke. I pointed at the thick stack of papers in front of her. Those are the wire transfer authorizations from the Cayman Island shell accounts. Look closely at the digital signatures at the bottom of the page. You authorized the transfers yourself. You signed the corporate tax returns. You knew exactly where the stolen money was coming from, and you used it to buy designer handbags while your husband's aunt lost her retirement savings. You are fully complicit in an international money laundering scheme. Evelyn threw herself between Uncle Harrison and Marcus, pushing them apart. She turned her furious, tear-stained face toward me. You could have stopped this, Evelyn wailed, pointing an accusatory finger at my chest. You own the debt. You have millions of dollars. You could clear this balance right now and save our home. You are making us homeless on Thanksgiving out of pure spite. You made me homeless in my own body, I replied, my voice dropping to a low, terrifying register. You stole my maternity fund when I was miscarrying your grandchild. You watched me grieve, and you handed my baby's nursery money to Brooke so she could buy imported silk dresses. Now the bank is taking the brick and mortar. You chose this path. The dining room was a scene of absolute devastation. Relatives were shouting and cursing at Marcus. Richard was clutching his chest, sinking back into his chair as he stared at the foreclosure notice. Brooke was weeping hysterically, realizing her entire fake empire was burned to ash. The trap they had set for me had snapped shut on their own necks. Before anyone could throw another punch or scream another threat, a series of heavy, aggressive, and unmistakable pounds echoed from the solid oak front door. The pounding was so loud and authoritative that it silenced the entire dining room instantly. The financial execution was complete. The criminal execution had just arrived. The pounding on the solid oak front door shook the crystal glasses on the mahogany table. Uncle Harrison froze his hands, still gripping Marcus by the collar. Evelyn let out a startled gasp, dropping her wine glass onto the expensive Persian rug. Before Richard could even command someone to answer it, the heavy double doors burst open. The freezing November wind rushed into the stifling dining room, bringing with it the harsh, blinding flash of red and blue emergency lights. A dozen men and women wearing dark tactical vests with the bright yellow letters FBI stamped across their backs flooded into our childhood home. Federal agents swarmed the foyer, their heavy boots tramping mud and rain over my mother's pristine marble floors. They fanned out across the dining room, instantly surrounding the long table. The extended family, the aunts and uncles who just minutes ago had been ready to excommunicate me, now scrambled backward, pressing themselves against the wallpaper in absolute terror. The lead agent, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a severe expression, stepped directly to the head of the table. Marcus Vance, the lead agent, barked, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. Step away from the table and keep your hands where I can see them. Marcus turned the color of chalk. His arrogant finance bro persona completely evaporated. He raised his trembling hands, stepping away from Uncle Harrison. Officer, there has been a massive misunderstanding, Marcus stammered, trying to smooth his wrinkled designer shirt. I am a senior vice president. I have lawyers. Whatever this is about, it is a civil matter. Embezzling millions of dollars from elderly pensioners and laundering it through offshore shell companies in the Cayman Islands is not a civil matter, the agent replied sharply. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, international money laundering, and grand larceny. The agent grabbed Marcus by the arms, spinning him around and slamming his chest flat against the polished mahogany dining table right next to the roasted turkey. The sharp, metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the silent room. Marcus let out a pathetic, breathy whine as the steel locked around his wrists. Evelyn screamed. It was not her usual theatrical manipulative performance. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure panic. She lunged forward, trying to grab the federal agent's arm. "You cannot do this!" Evelyn shrieked, her perfectly styled hair falling into her face. "He is a good boy. We are respectable people in this community. We sit on the church board. Zoe did this. My daughter fabricated these lies because she is a bitter, jealous woman. Arrest her." Another agent stepped in front of Evelyn, putting a firm hand on her shoulder and shoving her back. "Ma'am, if you interfere with a federal arrest, you will be leaving in handcuffs too," the agent warned. "We have the banking ledgers, the wire transfers, and the forged mortgage documents. Your son is looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary." Brooke watched her husband being manhandled by federal authorities. The reality of her situation finally shattered her delusional bubble. She scrambled backward, knocking her dining chair to the floor, her eyes wide with frantic desperation. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Marcus. "I did not know anything," Brooke shrieked, perfectly willing to throw the father of her children to the wolves to save her own skin. "He handled all the finances. I just ran my boutique. I am a mother. You cannot take me." From the back of the room, a familiar, commanding voice cut through Brooke's hysterical defense. Helen Sterling stepped into the dining room, her badge glinting under the chandelier. Her expression was utterly devoid of mercy. "You are a mother who physically assaulted her 8-year-old son in the back of a taxi and abandoned him in a thunderstorm," Helen stated coldly. Brooke choked on a sob, her eyes darting between Helen and the FBI agents. "No, that is a lie." "We have the dashcam footage, Brooke," I interjected, stepping out from the shadows of the dining room corner. "I bought the raw video from your driver. The entire precinct has already watched you slap your crying child across the face and tell Marcus to dump them on my porch because they would not die. You are not a victim. You are a violent, negligent fraud." The FBI lead agent turned his attention to Brooke. "Brooke Vance, you are also being detained for questioning regarding corporate tax evasion, accessory to wire fraud, and felony child endangerment." Agents moved in, grabbing Brooke by the arms. She thrashed and kicked, screaming for someone to call her Instagram sponsors, begging her followers who were not even there to save her. The sheer indignity of her arrest was a spectacular, beautiful thing to witness. Marcus twisted his head around as the agents dragged him toward the front door. He locked eyes with me, his face contorted with absolute venomous hatred. "You set me up!" Marcus spat, struggling against the cuffs. "You ruined my life." I walked right up to him, entirely unfazed by his pathetic rage. "You ruined your own life, Marcus. You thought you could use me as your shield forever. You thought you could throw me under the bus just like you did when we were 16, when you stole the church donation money and hid the empty envelopes under my mattress so Dad would beat me with his belt instead of you. You have been a coward your entire life. Today is just the day the bill finally came due." The agents hauled Marcus out the front door, dragging him down the brick steps and shoving him into the back of a waiting armored vehicle. Brooke was dragged out right behind him, her wails echoing down the affluent, tree-lined street for all the wealthy neighbors to hear. I turned back to the dining room. My aunts, uncles, and cousins were standing in stunned, horrified silence. They looked at the foreclosure notices still resting on their plates, then looked at me, finally realizing that the scapegoat they had mocked and isolated had just orchestrated the most surgical, devastating takedown in the history of this family. Richard remained frozen in his chair at the head of the table. He looked around his opulent dining room, listening to the sirens wailing outside. His golden son was gone. His stolen wealth was gone. The house he sat in legally belonged to me. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad," I said smoothly, picking up my black leather briefcase from the floor. "I suggest you start packing. You have a very busy month ahead of you." But I knew this was not over. Marcus and Brooke were desperate, cornered animals, and they were preparing for one final vicious courtroom battle to try and take everything down with them. The heavy oak doors of the Fulton County Federal Courthouse swung shut, sealing us inside the cavernous walls of Courtroom 4B. This was a highly unusual joint evidentiary hearing. Federal prosecutors were handling the extensive wire fraud and embezzlement charges, while the family court judge oversaw the emergency custody dispute regarding my niece and nephew. Marcus sat at the defense table wearing a bright orange county jumpsuit. The heavy silver chains of his handcuffs clinked against the wooden table every time he shifted his weight. He looked completely broken. The arrogant, untouchable finance executive persona had been stripped away, leaving only the sunken shoulders of a desperate man facing 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Brooke, however, had completely reinvented her aesthetic for the judge. She sat next to her high-profile defense attorney, Victor Thorne. She had abandoned her designer labels and heavy makeup. She wore a modest pale pink cardigan and kept her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail, clutching a tissue in her hands. She was playing the ultimate role of the traumatized, innocent white mother who had been terrorized by a wealthy, vindictive black sister-in-law. Victor Thorne stood up, buttoning his custom-tailored suit, and began pacing like a predator in front of the witness stand where I sat. He locked his cold, calculating gaze on me, ready to execute his $200,000 defense strategy. Ms. Vance Thorne boomed, his voice dripping with aggressive condescension. You expect this honorable court to believe that you, a single childless woman with a highly documented history of severe psychological trauma, simply stumbled upon this financial information. I suggest a different, far more accurate narrative. I suggest you are a deeply bitter woman who suffered a tragic miscarriage 4 years ago. That trauma festered into a dangerous obsessive jealousy toward my client. You saw Brooke Vance, a devoted mother with a beautiful, perfect family, and you decided to destroy her out of pure, unadulterated spite. You weaponized your corporate wealth and manipulated the state system to steal her children because you could not have your own. A low murmur rippled through the public gallery. I saw my mother Evelyn sitting in the second row, nodding vigorously in agreement with the lawyer she was helping pay for with whatever scraps of credit she had left. I looked at the judge, a stern, sharp-eyed woman who was taking meticulous notes, and then I looked back at Thorne. I did not flinch. I did not cry. I leaned forward, bringing my mouth an inch from the microphone. Mr. Thorne. I replied, my voice echoing with clinical, icy precision across the silent courtroom. I am not on trial today. Your clients are. And while your attempt to use my medical history as a weapon is a fascinating theatrical choice, it does not change the mathematical reality of federal wire fraud. I am not a bitter, jealous woman. I am a forensic auditor. I do not deal in emotion. I deal in receipts. Thorne smirked, stepping closer to the wooden barrier of the stand. Receipts, Ms. Vance. Let us talk about receipts. My client, Brooke Vance, is a dedicated mother and a small business owner. She trusted her husband to handle the complex household finances. When she realized you were trying to foreclose on her home and take her children, she panicked. Any mother would. You orchestrated a malicious setup at your old house to manufacture a child endangerment charge. You are the predator here. I reached into the black leather portfolio resting on my lap. I pulled out a thick stack of bank statements printed on high-gloss paper. I handed the first copy to the bailiff to pass to the judge, and the second copy directly to Thorne. Let us look at page 4 of that packet, Mr. Thorne, I instructed, watching the smug, confident smile slowly peel off his face. Your client claims she was just a dedicated mother running a small baby clothing boutique. Look at the highlighted transaction on October 12th. That is a wire transfer of $400,000 from a Cayman Islands shell company directly into Brooke Vance's personal checking account. The digital authorization signature belongs to Brooke. The IP address used to authorize the transfer was traced by my cybersecurity team directly to Brooke's personal smartphone. She did not just trust her husband. She actively received authorized and spent stolen pension funds. Brooke let out a loud theatrical sob from the defense table. I did not know what those documents were, she wailed, dabbing her completely dry eyes with the crumpled tissue. Marcus told me they were tax forms for my boutique. I just signed where he told me to sign. I am not a financial expert. I am just a mother trying to provide a good life for my babies. I pulled out a second stack of documents. This was the absolute beauty of forensic accounting. Every single lie leaves an undeniable digital footprint. You are a very busy mother, Brooke, I said, staring directly into her panicked, shifting eyes. According to these credit card statements, you spent $80,000 of that stolen money at a luxury jeweler in Paris, while your children were left with a nanny. You spent another $40,000 on custom Italian furniture for your home office. You claim you were tricked, but you logged into the offshore portal 32 times in the last 6 months to check the balances. But the most interesting expense is on page 7 of that packet, Your Honor. The judge flipped to page 7, her brow furrowing deeply as she read the itemized financial ledger. Brooke claimed she was a devoted wife who was entirely manipulated by her brilliant husband. I continued my voice, cutting through the courtroom air like a scalpel. She claimed she spent all her time and energy building a wholesome brand to support her mixed-race children. But if you look at the recurring monthly charges on that hidden black card, you will see a completely different story. For the past 2 years, Brooke has been paying $6,000 a month for a luxury penthouse apartment in downtown Atlanta. An apartment that is not registered to her and certainly not registered to Marcus. Marcus jerked his head up so fast his neck cracked. The heavy chains rattled loudly against the defense table as he lunged forward. He stared at his wife, his face twisting in sudden, absolute confusion. "Brooke? What is she talking about?" Marcus rasped, his voice cracking with panic. "What downtown apartment?" Brooke froze instantly. The crumpled tissue dropped from her trembling hands onto the floor. The fragile, innocent mother routine vanished in a flash, replaced by sheer naked terror. She looked at Thorne silently, begging her expensive shark lawyer to object, to shut me down, to do anything to stop the avalanche of truth crashing down on her head. Thorne opened his mouth quickly, raising his hand. "Objection, Your Honor. This line of questioning is entirely irrelevant to the fraud charges at hand." "Overruled," the judge snapped sharply, leaning forward and glaring at the banking ledgers. "The witness is establishing the defendant's active participation in the disbursement of fraudulent funds. Continue, Ms. Vance." I turned my gaze entirely to my brother, who was sitting in an orange jumpsuit, realizing his entire life was a lie. "Brooke did not just help you launder stolen money, Marcus. She used the money you stole from our parents and our extended family to fund a very specific, very private lifestyle." I pulled the final devastating document from my portfolio, ready to deliver the fatal blow to their marriage. I held up a thick manila envelope sealed with red security tape. The courtroom fell so silent you could hear the air conditioning humming through the overhead vents. Victor Thorne looked at the envelope like it was a live hand grenade. He knew his entire high-priced defense strategy was about to be blown to absolute pieces. I turned my attention back to the judge, keeping my posture perfectly straight. "Your Honor," I began, my voice projecting clearly across the vast room. "Brooke Vance has sat in this courtroom for the past 2 hours weeping about her absolute devotion to her children. She claimed she was completely ignorant of my brother's financial crimes, and that every single action she took was to provide a stable, loving home for her biracial children. But this lease agreement tells a vastly different story." I handed the document to the bailiff, who walked it up to the judge's bench. I handed a duplicate copy directly to Thorne. "The luxury downtown penthouse is leased under the name of Julian Pierce," I stated, watching Brooke's face turn the color of wet ash. "Julian is not my brother. Julian is a 28-year-old fitness instructor who frequently appears in the background of Brooke's workout vlogs. He is her personal trainer. And according to the building's electronic security logs, which my firm successfully subpoenaed, Brooke spends 4 afternoons a week at this specific penthouse." Marcus yanked against his heavy silver handcuffs. He stared at his wife with wide, bloodshot eyes. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Julian Marcus choked out his voice, cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched wheeze. "You told me he was just a brand ambassador. You told me you were doing collaborative content creation for your boutique." Brooke shrank away from her husband, pressing her back against the wooden chair. She looked frantically at Thorne, silently begging her expensive lawyer to fix the massive hole in her flawless mommy vlogger facade. "Objection!" Thorne shouted, slamming his hand flat on the defense table. "My client's personal relationships have absolutely no bearing on the financial fraud charges or this custody dispute. This is a blatant character assassination." "It has everything to do with the fraud and the custody dispute," I fired back, my voice ringing with lethal authority. I did not wait for the judge to rule on the objection. Because Brooke did not just use the stolen offshore money to pay for her lover's luxury apartment. When Marcus's accounts got frozen by my audit last week, she needed a new source of rapid capital to keep paying Julian's rent and buying him expensive gifts. She could not access the Cayman Islands shell accounts anymore, so she liquidated her own children's assets. A collective gasp ripped through the public gallery. "Look at page 9 of the financial packet, Your Honor," I instructed. Last month, Brooke legally emptied both of her children's 529 college savings plans. She drained $80,000 meant for her children's future education and wired it directly to Julian Pierce's personal bank account. She robbed her own 6- and 8-year-old children to fund her secret affair. Evelyn, sitting in the second row of the gallery, let out a horrified, guttural shriek. The perfect white daughter-in-law she had fiercely protected, the woman she had stolen my emergency maternity fund to support, had just been exposed as a cheating child robbing parasite. Evelyn clutched her chest, but this time she was not faking a panic attack. The shock was entirely genuine. Marcus completely lost his mind. The devastating reality crushed whatever remaining sanity he possessed. He had committed federal wire fraud, destroyed his parents' retirement, alienated his sister, and faced 20 years in federal prison to provide a billionaire lifestyle for a woman who was actively draining his kids' college funds to sleep with a fitness instructor. "You stole from our kids!" Marcus roared, his voice echoing violently off the high ceilings. He lunged out of his chair, throwing his entire body weight toward Brooke. The heavy chains connecting his wrists and ankles rattled fiercely as he crashed into the edge of the defense table, papers scattered everywhere. Brooke screamed, scrambling backward and knocking her chair to the hardwood floor. "Get him away from me!" she shrieked, cowering behind Victor Thorne, attempting to use the lawyer as a human shield. Two armed bailiffs rushed forward instantly. They grabbed Marcus by the shoulders, wrestling him away from his wife and slamming him forcefully back down into his seat. Marcus did not fight the bailiffs. He just stared at Brooke, tears of pure, unadulterated rage streaming down his face. "I ruined my life for you!" Marcus screamed, sobbing uncontrollably in front of the entire courtroom. "I let my parents steal Zoe's money to save your stupid boutique. I put my own father's house into foreclosure to buy your designer bags. You told me we were a team. You told me I was the only man who could give you the world." I watched my brother break down and felt absolutely nothing. There was no pity left in my heart. "You were never a team, Marcus," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through his hysterical sobbing. "You were a wallet, and the second that wallet ran dry, she cannibalized your children's future to keep herself entertained. You sacrificed your entire bloodline for an illusion." The judge banged her wooden gavel repeatedly, demanding order in her courtroom. Her face was a mask of absolute, undeniable disgust. She looked down at Brooke, who was still trying to squeeze out fake tears of victimization while hiding behind her defense attorney. "Mrs. Vance," the judge said, her voice dripping with judicial contempt, "you sit in my courtroom and claim you are a protective mother, while the financial records clearly show you exploiting your own minors to fund an illicit relationship. Your performative tears hold absolutely no weight in this jurisdiction. You are not a victim. You are a financial predator." Brooke realized she was entirely trapped. She had no money, no leverage, no internet followers to manipulate, and no husband to hide behind. She slumped against the defense table, burying her face in her hands, thoroughly defeated by the undeniable digital footprint she left behind. The judge turned her fierce gaze away from the shattered couple at the defense table. She looked directly at the public gallery where my parents were sitting in stunned, horrified silence. The hammer of justice had utterly crushed Marcus and Brooke, but the architects of this toxic family dynamic were still sitting in the second row, desperately hoping to escape the carnage. I turned in my seat on the witness stand and locked eyes with my father. I was not stepping down from this podium until every single debt was paid in full. The judge struck her wooden gavel one final time, the sharp crack echoing like a gunshot that permanently ended the Vance family's reign of terror. She looked down from her elevated bench, her eyes locked onto Brooke, who was still huddled on the floor behind Victor Thorne. "Stand up, Mrs. Vance," the judge commanded. Her voice carried no warmth, only the absolute freezing weight of the federal justice system. Brooke scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking so violently she had to grip the edge of the defense table just to stay upright. The pale pink cardigan she wore to project maternal innocence now looked entirely pathetic. "You came into this courtroom seeking emergency custody of your children," the judge stated, reading from her official ruling. "You attempted to use the legal system to paint a false narrative of victimhood. Instead, the evidence presented today proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are a physically abusive, financially predatory individual who actively endangered your own offspring and cannibalized their educational funds to finance a secret illicit lifestyle. Therefore, I am immediately terminating your parental rights. Full physical and legal custody of both minors will remain with the state under the direct supervision of Director Helen Sterling until a suitable, permanent foster placement is finalized. Furthermore, based on the documented wire transfers, I'm referring you to the federal prosecutor for immediate indictment on charges of accessory to wire fraud and tax evasion." Brooke let out a strangled, breathless gasp. She reached out toward Thorne, but the highly paid defense attorney physically stepped away from her, rapidly packing his expensive briefcase. He knew a lost cause when he saw one. Two federal marshals moved in instantly, flanking Brooke and securing her arms behind her back. She did not fight them. The reality of a federal prison sentence had completely paralyzed her. The judge then turned her fierce attention to Marcus. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, her tone dropping to a dangerous register, "you orchestrated a multi-million-dollar international Ponzi scheme, stole the retirement savings of elderly citizens, and utilized offshore shell corporations to hide your assets. You then attempted to use violent underground syndicate money to fund your legal defense. You are the absolute definition of an extreme flight risk. Bail is unequivocally denied. You will be remanded to federal custody pending your criminal trial." Marcus did not look at the judge. He did not look at his weeping wife. He turned his head and stared directly at me, his eyes hollow, finally realizing that his arrogance had cost him his entire existence. The bailiffs hauled him to his feet, the heavy chains dragging across the hardwood floor as they marched him out of the courtroom toward the holding cells. I watched him disappear through the heavy wooden doors, feeling a profound, absolute sense of closure. But my work was not entirely finished. I stood up from the witness stand, holding the final document from my leather portfolio. I looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," I said clearly, "there is one final matter regarding the civil asset forfeiture tied to this fraud. The defense attempted to argue that the foreclosure on my parents' estate was an act of personal malice. I would like to submit the final banking ledger into the court record." The bailiff took the paper and handed it to the bench. The judge reviewed the document, her eyes narrowing as she read the highlighted sections. I turned to look at my father Richard and my mother Evelyn, who were clutching each other in the gallery. "My parents have claimed absolute ignorance of Marcus's crimes," I announced to the silent courtroom. "They claimed they were innocent victims of his fraudulent remortgaging scheme. But that document proves otherwise. 5 months ago, when Marcus missed his first massive margin call, Richard Vance authorized a direct transfer of $200,000 from his personal business account into Marcus's Cayman Island shell company to help him hide the deficit. My father knew exactly what Marcus was doing. He actively participated in covering up the federal fraud to protect the family image. Therefore, the house was not stolen from them. They willingly leveraged it to participate in a criminal enterprise." The judge looked up from the document, her expression darkening with severe disappointment. She looked at Richard, who was now trembling uncontrollably. "This court finds the foreclosure action executed by Zoe Vance to be entirely lawful and financially justified," the judge ruled, her voice echoing with finality. "Richard and Evelyn Vance, you were complicit in the financial shielding of stolen assets. The foreclosure stands. You have exactly 48 hours to vacate the premises before federal marshals seize the property to fulfill the outstanding creditor obligations. Court is adjourned." The judge struck her gavel and exited the bench. The courtroom immediately descended into chaotic murmurs, but I only heard the frantic, scrambling footsteps of my parents. They rushed past the wooden barrier, practically throwing themselves at my feet before the bailiffs could intercept them. Evelyn fell to her knees, her designer dress pooling on the dirty courtroom floor. She reached out, grabbing the fabric of my crimson suit pants with desperate, clawing hands. "Zoe, please," Evelyn sobbed, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. "You cannot do this. We will have nothing. We will be out on the street. Where are we supposed to go? All of our friends saw the news. Nobody will take us in. We are your mother and father. We gave you life. You cannot leave us to die in the gutter." Richard dropped to his knees right beside her. The towering, arrogant patriarch who had threatened to write me out of his will just days ago was now weeping openly, his shoulders shaking with absolute terror. "Please," my father begged, looking up at me with bloodshot, desperate eyes. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything. I was wrong about Marcus. I was wrong about Brooke. You were the only one who was actually smart. You are the successful one. We see that now. Just give us the house. You have millions of dollars. You do not need that house, Zoe. Have mercy on your family." I stood perfectly still, looking down at the two people who had spent my entire life breaking my spirit, stealing my money, and treating me like an unwanted burden. I watched them grovel, sacrificing whatever dignity they had left just to save their material possessions. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I did not feel the urge to comfort them. I simply felt the absolute, undeniable power of justice. I reached down and firmly pried Evelyn's fingers off my suit. I took a step back, putting physical distance between myself and their toxic desperation. Mercy is a luxury reserved for people who show remorse before they get caught, I said, my voice eerily calm and utterly devoid of emotion. "You are not sorry that you abused me. You are not sorry that you stole my maternity fund. You are only sorry that the bank accounts are empty and the cameras are rolling. You chose to gamble your entire legacy on a man who sold you out for a luxury lifestyle. I am simply the debt collector executing the final transaction." I picked up my black leather briefcase from the witness stand, snapping the brass locks shut with a sharp, echoing click. I looked down at my weeping parents one last time, completely severing the invisible chains they had wrapped around my neck since childhood. "You have 48 hours to pack your bags," I reminded them coldly. "Do not leave any trash in my house." Evelyn lunged forward again, her hands grasping at the empty air as I stepped out of her reach. Richard remained frozen on the floor, a broken patriarch weeping over the shattered remains of his stolen empire. At the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, the federal marshals had paused to secure Marcus's transport restraints. My brother twisted his head to look back at the devastation he had caused. He looked at our parents on their knees. He looked at Brooke being processed by a separate team of agents. Finally, his hollow, bloodshot eyes met mine. He opened his mouth, perhaps to hurl one last pathetic insult, or perhaps to beg for financial salvation, but I did not give him the chance to speak a single syllable. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, until I stood just a few feet away from him and my sobbing parents. I looked down at the three of them, the architects of my lifelong suffering. I leaned in, locking eyes with Marcus, and echoed the exact words he had spat at me on the phone during the thunderstorm. "I am a CEO," I said, my voice ringing with absolute, undeniable finality. "And you are all homeless felons. My responsibility is not to serve this family." Marcus flinched, as if I had struck him directly across the face with a physical object. The marshals yanked his heavy chains, dragging him through the doorway and out of my life forever. Evelyn let out a blood-curdling scream, wailing my name, begging God to punish me for abandoning them in their darkest hour. Richard joined her, his pathetic sobs echoing against the high vaulted ceilings of the courtroom. I turned my back on them. I did not hesitate for even a fraction of a second. I did not look over my shoulder to see their tears. I walked out of the courtroom, pushed open the heavy brass doors of the federal building, and stepped out into the crisp, bright afternoon air. The frantic, desperate screams of my parents were instantly silenced by the thick courthouse walls, leaving only the peaceful, rhythmic hum of the Atlanta city streets. 6 weeks later, the final remnants of the Vance family facade were completely erased from the earth. My liquidation firm successfully auctioned off the suburban estate. The antique furniture, the imported rugs, and the crystal chandeliers my mother had worshipped were sold to the highest bidders to satisfy the massive commercial debts. Richard and Evelyn were forced to move into a tiny rundown apartment on the outskirts of the city. They were relying entirely on a meager state pension because their fraudulent accounts had been permanently seized by the federal government. They had no country club memberships, no wealthy friends, and no golden son to brag about. They were entirely isolated, trapped in the miserable reality they had built with their own hands. Marcus and Brooke were both denied bail a second time. They were sitting in separate federal holding facilities, awaiting a trial they had absolutely no chance of winning. Their social media empires were permanently deleted. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their names were synonymous with disgrace. But amidst the absolute destruction of my abusers, new life was finally allowed to bloom. I sat at my desk in my corner office overlooking the glittering city skyline when my private phone buzzed. It was Helen Sterling. We did not speak often, maintaining a strict professional boundary, but she called to give me the only update I actually cared about. The children were safe. Helen informed me that my niece and nephew had been placed with a highly vetted, loving foster family in a quiet, affluent suburb outside the city. The foster parents were trauma educators who had instantly bonded with the kids. My nephew was playing on a community soccer team. My niece was taking art classes. They were no longer being used as social media props or emotional punching bags. They were receiving intense therapy and were finally allowed to just be normal, happy children. Helen told me that the state was already moving forward with the permanent adoption process for the foster family, ensuring Marcus and Brooke would never be allowed within 100 miles of them again. I thanked Helen, ending the call with a profound sense of peace. I had not saved them by taking them in and becoming a mother figure. I had saved them by destroying the monsters who owned them and handing them over to professionals who could give them the exact life they deserved. I packed up my briefcase, running my hand along the smooth mahogany wood of my desk. I walked out of my corporate headquarters, nodding to my security team, and took the private elevator down to the executive garage. The winter cold had finally broken, giving way to an unusually warm, brilliant spring afternoon. I stepped out of the glass lobby and walked toward my luxury sports car waiting at the curb. I opened the driver door and tossed my briefcase onto the passenger seat. Before I started the engine, I paused. I leaned back against the premium leather headrest, closing my eyes for just a moment. The warm sunlight poured through the tinted windshield, bathing my face in golden light. The heavy, suffocating weight that I had carried since childhood, the constant pressure to please people who hated me, the crushing grief of my stolen maternity fund, it was all completely gone. The slate was wiped clean. I had burned the toxic forest to the ground, and I was the only one left standing in the ashes. I opened my eyes, a genuine radiant smile spreading across my face. I pressed the ignition button. The powerful engine roared to life with a deep, satisfying growl. I shifted the car into gear, pulled out onto the open road, and drove straight into the bright sun, free from the parasites of my past. The story teaches us that true power comes from financial independence and emotional detachment from toxic family dynamics. Zoe wins because she stops seeking validation from people committed to misunderstanding her. Instead of reacting with tears or screaming, she responds with undeniable facts and strategic leverage. Blood relations do not excuse abuse, manipulation, or financial exploitation. The ultimate revenge is not just exposing their lies, but building a successful, self-sufficient life where their opinions and threats no longer hold any weight. You can choose to walk away and protect your own peace. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories about standing up and claiming your worth.